The scent hit me first, a delicate mix of jasmine and something else I couldn't quite place. Not my perfume. Not anything I owned. It clung to Mason's dress shirt like an accusation, faint but unmistakable as I stood in our laundry room. Frozen with the fabric pressed against my face. I'm Trinity, and until this moment, I thought I knew exactly who I was, a devoted wife living what I believed was a charmed life with my husband of 8 years. But that unfamiliar fragrance changed everything. Hey, what's taking so long with my shirts? Mason called from upstairs. His voice carried that slight edge of impatience I'd grown accustomed to lately. Just sorting colors, I answered, proud of how steady my voice remained. I dropped the shirt into the washer like it had burned me, then added extra detergent. Part of me wanted to obliterate that scent, while another part wanted to preserve it as evidence. I need the blue one for tomorrow's meeting, he said, footsteps approaching. I quickly closed the washer lid and turned to face him. Mason filled the doorway, all 6 feet of him radiating the confidence that had first drawn me to him. His dark hair was slightly disheveled from running his hands through it, a habit when he was working late on his laptop. Which seemed to happen more and more these days. The blue one's still at the cleaners, I lied, watching his face carefully. I'll pick it up first thing tomorrow. He frowned, checking his phone. You should have told me earlier. I needed that shirt. Sorry, I said, the word tasting bitter. I've been distracted lately. Clearly. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, Jessica called. She's having some financial troubles and needs a place to stay for a while. My stomach clenched. His sister had always treated our home like her personal hotel, coming and going as she pleased. For how long? However long she needs, Mason replied, his tone leaving no room for discussion. She's family. Family. The word echoed in my head as he walked away. I waited until his footsteps faded before pulling out my phone and opening the banking app. Our joint account showed several recent restaurant charges at places I'd never been to, all during those late nights he claimed to be working. The washer hummed behind me, washing away evidence I should have photographed. But I knew that perfume would haunt me, a ghost of something I couldn't yet prove but felt in my bones to be true. I scrolled through our photos from last month's anniversary dinner. Mason's smile looked genuine as he raised his glass to 8 years together. Had he been lying even then? The Mason in that photo seemed like a stranger now, wearing a mask I'd somehow never noticed before. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, "Can't wait to catch up, sis. See you tomorrow." Face blowing a kiss. I stared at those cheerful emojis, remembering how she'd always sided with Mason during our rare arguments. How she'd laugh off my concerns about his late nights. "You're so paranoid, Trinity," she'd say. "Mason works hard for you both." The washer clicked into its spin cycle, and I made a decision. I opened my browser and typed, "How to track a cheating spouse." Then I deleted it and wrote instead, "Best private investigators in the area." Upstairs, Mason's voice drifted down as he took another call, speaking too softly for me to make out the words. But I didn't need to hear them. That perfume had already told me everything I needed to know. The question now wasn't whether my husband was faithful, it was what I planned to do about it. I saved 3 investigator numbers in my phone under innocuous names: yoga studio, book club, and dentist. Tomorrow, I'd start making calls. But tonight, I had to prepare for Jessica's arrival and pretend everything was normal. I was getting good at pretending lately. Maybe too good. The washer beeped its cycle complete. I transferred the clothes to the dryer, handling that blue shirt last. The perfume was gone now, but its memory lingered like a promise of things to come. Jessica arrived like a hurricane, 3 designer suitcases trailing behind her as she swept through our front door. Mason carried them upstairs while she collapsed onto our couch, her perfectly manicured hand draped across her forehead. "You wouldn't believe the nightmare I've been through," she sighed. "My landlord is such a monster. Who evicts someone just because they're a few months behind on rent?" I busied myself in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter. "How many months exactly?" Oh, who keeps track of these things? Jessica waved dismissively. Mason said I could stay as long as I need. You don't mind, right, Trinity? The knife clicked against the cutting board as I chopped vegetables for dinner. Each slice felt deliberate, therapeutic. Of course not. Your family. Mason returned, immediately gravitating toward his sister. I put you in the guest room overlooking the garden. Best view in the house. You're the best brother ever, Jessica cooed. Then, eyeing my cooking preparations, oh, are we eating in? I was hoping we could try that new bistro downtown. The one you mentioned, Mason? My knife paused mid-chop. Which bistro is that? Just some place near the office, Mason answered quickly. Nothing special. Jessica's eyes widened slightly before she covered with a laugh. Well, anywhere's better than cooking at home. No offense, Trinity. None taken. I scraped the vegetables into the trash. Let me change. Upstairs, I called the first investigator on my list, speaking in hushed tones. How soon can you start surveillance? We can begin tomorrow, the woman replied. But it's not cheap. I glanced at my personal savings account, the one Mason didn't know about. That won't be a problem. At the bistro, I watched Mason and Jessica share private jokes and meaningful glances. They'd always been close, but something felt different now. When the waiter arrived, Mason ordered without consulting me. The usual for me, he said, then added, and my wife will have the salmon. Actually, I interrupted, I'll have the steak. Rare. Jessica's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. Since when do you eat red meat? People change. I met her gaze steadily. Sometimes they're not who we think they are at all. Mason's phone buzzed. He checked it under the table, his expression shifting subtly before he excused himself. Work emergency. Won't be long. As soon as he was out of earshot, Jessica leaned forward. What's going on with you lately? Mason says you've been acting strange. Does he? I took a slow sip of wine. And what else does Mason tell you? He's worried about you. We both are. Her concern would have seemed genuine if I hadn't noticed her eyes darting toward the direction Mason had gone. You seem different. Different how? Suspicious. Defensive. She reached across the table to pat my hand. I resisted the urge to pull away. Mason works so hard for you. You should be grateful. Grateful, I repeated, the word tasting like ash. Through the restaurant's window, I caught a glimpse of Mason outside, his phone pressed to his ear, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. Yes, grateful. Do you know how many women would kill to have a husband like him? I watched as Mason paced, running his fingers through his hair, his tell when he was excited about something. Or someone. I'm starting to wonder if they already do. Jessica's face hardened for a moment before smoothing back into concerned sister-in-law mode. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could respond, Mason returned, tucking his phone away. Sorry about that. Where were we? Just girl talk, Jessica chirped, but her eyes held a warning when they met mine. I smiled and raised my glass. To family, I said. And all their little secrets. Mason's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Jessica's laugh came a beat too late. And in that moment, watching them both squirm, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but now it had company, a cold, calculating clarity about what needed to be done. The investigator would start tomorrow. But tonight, I had a front-row seat to their performance, and I intended to study every act. The investigator's photos arrived in my encrypted email at 3 a.m. My hands trembled as I scrolled through them on my phone, each image a knife twisting deeper. Mason and a woman, tall, elegant, confident, sharing intimate moments outside an upscale apartment building. His hand on her lower back. Their faces close, laughing. A kiss that looked anything but casual. I zoomed in on her face. She was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache, not because of her looks, but because of how happy Mason looked beside her. I hadn't seen that expression on his face in years. "Can't sleep?" Jessica's voice made me jump. She stood in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in an expensive silk robe. I locked my phone. "Just checking work emails." "At 3 in the morning?" She opened the fridge, the light casting harsh shadows across her face. "Mason mentioned you've been acting strange lately." "Distant." "Did he?" I kept my voice neutral. "When was this?" "Earlier today, while you were at the gym." Jessica poured herself water, studying me over the rim of her glass. "He's worried about you." The lie settled between us like poison. I'd never left for the gym. I'd been following Mason to his other life, watching him play house with the woman I now knew was named Avery Thompson. According to the investigator's report. "How thoughtful of him to notice," I said. Jessica set down her glass with deliberate care. "He notices more than you think." "I'm sure he does." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Especially at that bistro downtown." Her expression flickered. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Just thinking out loud." I headed for the stairs, then paused. "Jessica? How long have you known about Avery?" The glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. In the silence that followed, her face told me everything I needed to know. "Trinity, I don't." My voice came out steady, surprising us both. "Just clean up your mess. You're good at covering things up, aren't you?" The next morning, I waited until Mason left for work, before following him again. This time, I watched him enter a coffee shop where Avery waited. Through the window, I saw him slide into the booth beside her, not across from her. Intimate. Familiar. My phone buzzed, a text from Jessica, "We need to talk." I ignored it, watching as Mason pulled out a small jewelry box. Avery's face lit up as she opened it, and even from across the street, I could see the diamond catch the light. My own wedding ring felt like it was burning my finger. Another text, "Please, Trinity. It's not what you think." I switched off my phone and walked into the coffee shop. The bell above the door chimed cheerfully as I approached their table. Mason's back was to me, but I saw the exact moment Avery noticed me, her smile faltering, her eyes widening in recognition. "Hello, Mason," I said. He froze, then turned slowly. The color drained from his face as he looked between Avery and me. "Trinity? What are you doing here?" I smiled at Avery, who was staring at my wedding ring. "I thought it was time I met the woman my husband's been having dinner with at that bistro downtown. The one Jessica's been helping him cover up." "Mason?" Avery's voice shook. "What is she talking about?" He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Avery, I can explain." "Explain what?" I cut in. "How you've been living two lives. Or how your sister's been helping you juggle them?" The jewelry box sat open between them, the diamond ring inside catching the light just like my wedding ring had 8 years ago. The symmetry would have been poetic if it wasn't so painful. "Trinity, please," Mason started, but I was already turning away. "Enjoy your coffee," I said. "And Avery? That ring?" He gave me the same one. Down to the cut and setting. "He's not just a cheater, he's an unoriginal one." I walked out, leaving chaos in my wake. Through the window, I saw Avery stand up, tears streaming down her face. Mason reached for her, but she jerked away, grabbing her purse and rushing past me outside. My phone had 7 missed calls from Jessica. I turned it back on and texted her one word, "Checkmate." My parents' house looked exactly as it had when I left 8 years ago, right down to the crooked welcome mat I now stood on. Finger hovering over the doorbell. Before I could press it, Mom opened the door. "I saw you from the window 10 minutes ago," she said, pulling me into a hug. "How long were you planning to stand there?" The familiar scent of her lavender perfume broke something inside me. My shoulders shook as she held me tighter, not asking questions, just waiting. Dad appeared in the hallway, his reading glasses perched on his head. "Who's at the Trinity?" His expression shifted from surprise to concern. "What did he do?" I followed them into the kitchen, where Mom's half-finished crossword puzzle sat next to a cooling cup of tea. Such normal things. My life had stopped feeling normal the moment I found that perfume on Mason's shirt. "You should see your face when we mention him," Dad said quietly. "Like you're bracing for impact." I placed the manila envelope from the investigator on their kitchen table. Mom reached for it, but I caught her hand. "Are you sure you want to see?" She squared her shoulders. "If you're strong enough to live it, we're strong enough to know it." The photos spilled across their floral tablecloth, Mason and Avery's documented affair laid bare. Mom's hand flew to her mouth when she saw the jewelry box picture. Dad's face darkened with each image. "Jessica knew," I said. "She's been covering for him. Living in our house, watching me search for answers she had all along." "That little," Dad started, but Mom touched his arm. "What do you need from us, sweetheart?" The question caught me off guard. Everyone else had told me what to do, how to feel. Mason with his gaslighting, Jessica with her dismissive concern, even the investigator with her professional advice about gathering evidence. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to burn everything down. Show everyone what he really is. But another part wants to protect him still," Mom finished. "Because that's who you are. A protector. I don't want to be that person anymore." Dad gathered the photos, stacking them precisely. "Then don't be. But choose who you become next carefully. Revenge might feel good now, but it burns both ways." My phone buzzed, Avery's number. The investigator had included it in her report, but I hadn't expected her to contact me. The text read, "Can we meet? There's more you need to know." "She's reaching out," I showed them the message. "Mason's other. I don't even know what to call her. Victim? Accomplice? Fellow survivor," Mom suggested. "Maybe you both need answers. Or maybe it's a trap," Dad countered. "Mason finding another way to manipulate you." I stared at the message until the screen went dark. What if it's both? What if everything's both now, truth and lies, justice and revenge? Mom reached across the table, her wedding ring catching the light, 40 years of faithful marriage glinting against my 8 years of lies. "Then you choose your truth. Your justice. Not what Mason deserves, but what you need to heal." My phone buzzed again. "Jessica, Mason's telling everyone you're having a mental breakdown. Please come home before you do something you'll regret." The threat was clear, wrapped in concern like all their manipulations. But sitting in my parents' kitchen, surrounded by genuine love and support, the message lost its power to wound. I typed back, "You're right. I am coming home. And I'm bringing the truth with me." To Avery, I wrote, "Tomorrow. 2 p.m. You pick the place. Are you sure about this?" Dad asked, watching me gather the photos. "No," I admitted. "But I'm sure about one thing, I'm done being the only one carrying these secrets." Mom hugged me again at the door, slipping something into my pocket. Later, in my car, I found her old house key on a new keychain. The message was clear, I had a safe place to land when everything exploded. And things were about to explode. Mason and Jessica had written this story for years. Now it was my turn, and I was choosing a different ending. Avery chose a small cafe across town, far from Mason's usual haunts. I arrived early, watching her through the window as she settled into a corner booth. She looked different now, less polished, more real. The engagement ring was gone. "I brought something you should see," she said as I sat down, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, property records, and what looked like business contracts. Mason isn't just lying about his relationships. My coffee arrived, but I couldn't take my eyes off the documents. Numbers jumped out at me, large transfers, hidden accounts, properties I'd never heard of. how did you get these? I'm a financial analyst. When things didn't add up, I started digging. Avery's hands trembled slightly as she pointed to specific transactions. He's been moving money around, creating shell companies. Your signature is on some of these documents. No, it's not. Then I saw it. My signature, perfect in every detail, on papers I'd never seen. He forged these? With Jessica's help. She's not just his sister, she's his business partner. The cafe's warmth suddenly felt stifling. Every memory of Jessica's financial troubles took on a new, darker meaning. They're using my identity for fraud. Among other things. Avery glanced around before lowering her voice. There's more. I found evidence they've done this before, with other women. It's their pattern. My phone buzzed, Mason asking where I was. I ignored it. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm their next target. The engagement, the joint venture proposals, it's all part of their scheme. She pulled out one final document. And because yesterday, I found this. It was a life insurance policy in my name, recently updated. The beneficiary had been changed to Mason, and the coverage amount had tripled. They're planning something, Avery said. Something big. And soon. I stood up abruptly, needing air. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, too normal, for the darkness spreading through my thoughts. Avery followed. Trinity, wait. We need to. To what? Go to the police? Tell them my husband and his sister are running some elaborate con? That they might be, I couldn't finish the sentence. We have evidence now. Real evidence. Another text from Mason, Jessica says you took some files from my office. We need to talk. I showed Avery the message. They know. Then we don't have much time. She handed me a business card. My brother's a lawyer specializing in financial fraud. He can help, but we need to move fast. I thought of my packed suitcase hidden in my parents' garage, the emergency cash, the escape plan I'd been crafting. It wasn't enough anymore. This wasn't just about infidelity or betrayal, it was about survival. I have to go home, I said. Get something from the house before they realize what we know. That's exactly what they want. Trinity, it's not safe. Nothing's safe anymore. I started walking to my car. But I'm done being their victim. At least let me help. I can. No. I turned back to her. Stay away from the house. If I'm not in touch by tonight, give everything to your brother. Everything. The drive home felt surreal. 8 years of marriage dissolving into a criminal conspiracy. Every loving gesture, every family moment with Jessica, had any of it been real? Mason's car was in the driveway when I arrived. Jessica's too. They were waiting for me, probably with another perfectly crafted lie, another manipulation. But I had something they didn't know about, the truth. I touched my mother's key in my pocket, thinking of her words about choosing my own justice. Then I checked that the recording app on my phone was running and walked into my house for what I knew would be the last time. There you are, Mason called from the living room. We'd been worried sick. I closed the door behind me, hearing the click like a gunshot. Have you? How thoughtful of you both. It was time to see who would break first. Mason and Jessica sat in our living room like royalty holding court. The same room where we'd celebrated holidays, shared dreams, built what I thought was a family. Now it felt like a trap closing in. You've been acting erratic, Mason said, his voice carrying that concerned tone he used when manipulating clients. We're worried about your mental state. I placed Avery's folder on the coffee table between us. Worried I'd find these? Jessica's perfectly manicured nails dug into the armrest. Mason didn't move, but something flickered behind his eyes. Where did you get those? He asked softly. Does it matter? What matters is what they show. I pulled out the life insurance policy. Planning for my unfortunate accident, Mason? He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. Honey, you're not well. Those documents are standard business practices. Jessica can explain. Like she explained her financial troubles? I turned to his sister. How many other women have you helped him destroy? Jessica stood abruptly. You ungrateful bitch. Everything we did was for this family. Family? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. Is that what you call your little criminal enterprise? Mason moved then, quick as a snake, snatching the folder. You've been talking to Avery. She's smarter than you gave her credit for. We both are. He leafed through the documents, his mask slipping with each page. These are copies. The originals are safe. Along with everything else I've gathered. Jessica's phone buzzed. She checked it, her face paling. Mason, we have a problem. The Thompson account. Shut up, he snapped, then softened his voice. Trinity, sweetheart, you're confused. Let's talk about this rationally. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. Or what? His tone changed completely, ice replacing concern. You'll run to the police? Tell them your crazy conspiracy theories? Who do you think they'll believe, the respected businessman or his unstable wife? They'll believe the evidence. What evidence? Jessica held up my phone, she must have grabbed it when I was focused on Mason. This recording? Oops. She dropped it into her water glass. I watched my safety net short-circuit and die. You should have stayed ignorant, Mason said, almost sadly. It would have been easier. For who? For everyone. He pulled out his own phone. Now we have to do this the hard way. The front door opened. 2 men in uniforms entered, private security, not police. I recognized their company logo from one of Mason's shell corporations. Mrs. Walker has been experiencing severe paranoid delusions, Mason told them, his voice professional and concerned. She needs specialized care. No. I backed away, but Jessica blocked my path to the stairs. You can't do this. We already have, she smirked. The papers are all signed, by you, remember? My forged signature. On medical papers I'd never seen. Giving him power over my freedom. The facility is very discreet, Mason said as the men approached. You'll get all the help you need. I looked at the husband I'd loved, the sister-in-law I'd trusted, seeing strangers wearing familiar faces. Everything had been a lie, right from the start. You won't get away with this, I said, but my voice shook. Mason smiled, that same charming smile that had won me 8 years ago. I already have. Multiple times. The security men reached for my arms. I fought, but they were too strong. Through my struggles, I saw Jessica picking up the scattered documents, erasing the evidence of their crimes. It's for the best, Mason said as they dragged me toward the door. In time, you'll understand. My last sight was Jessica's triumphant smirk as she dropped the folders into the fireplace. Everything I'd gathered, burning away like my future. But they didn't know about Avery's copies. Or the email I'd scheduled to send to her brother if I didn't check in by midnight. As they forced me into their waiting car, I held on to that thought like a lifeline. They'd won this battle. But the war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The private facility's white walls closed in around me as I waited in the consultation room, my hands folded in my lap like a good, docile patient. 3 days of playing along, swallowing sugar pills, nodding at patronizing doctors who believed Mason's lies. The door opened. Mason entered, immaculate in his business suit, followed by Jessica. Their confidence faltered when they saw Avery sitting beside me. What is she doing here? Jessica demanded. Visiting hours are for family only, Mason said smoothly, reaching for the call button. Don't bother, Avery said. The staff are rather busy dealing with federal agents right now. The color drained from Mason's face. Jessica grabbed her brother's arm. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice trembled. I stood, steady on my feet despite the sedatives they'd tried forcing on me. The FBI doesn't bluff about wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted murder. Murder? Mason laughed, but his eyes darted to the door. "You're delusional. That's why you're here." "That's why you put me here," I corrected. "But I wasn't the first, was I?" "Tell me, what happened to Catherine Porter?" He flinched at the name. Jessica's perfectly manicured nails dug into his arm. "She had an accident," Jessica said quickly. "Everyone knows that." "Like I was supposed to have an accident?" I pulled out my phone, my real phone, not the one they'd destroyed. "The FBI has been very interested in the pattern. Young women, married to Mason, diagnosed as unstable, then tragic accidents following massive insurance payouts." Mason's mask cracked. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, she can." Avery stepped forward, her own phone recording. "Your sister talks in her sleep, Mason. Has for years. Remember those sleepovers when we were roommates, Jessica? I recorded everything." Jessica's face contorted. "You bitch." She lunged at Avery, but I stepped between them. "It's over. The FBI has everything, the forged documents, the offshore accounts, Jessica's confessions. Even Catherine's real autopsy report." "You're lying," Mason whispered, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "Am I?" I moved closer, seeing fear replace confidence in his eyes. "Check your phone. The Thompson account isn't the only one frozen. Everything's gone, Mason. Everything." His phone buzzed. He checked it, hands shaking. Jessica peered over his shoulder, her face crumpling. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." "Yes," Avery said. "Your empire's falling, and we made sure everyone knows why. Your investors, your clients, your other potential victims, they all received very detailed emails an hour ago." Mason's composure shattered. He grabbed my throat, slamming me against the wall. "You destroyed everything." "Mason, don't." Jessica screamed, but Avery was already moving, her taser connecting with his side. He crumpled, twitching. The door burst open. FBI agents poured in, weapons drawn. Jessica tried to run, but didn't make it 2 steps. As they read Mason his rights, he stared at me with pure hatred. "You'll never prove it," he spat. "You're just a crazy woman. My unstable wife." I knelt beside him, speaking softly so only he could hear. "That's where you're wrong. I'm not your wife anymore. The divorce papers were filed last week. You're not my problem, you're the FBI's problem now." "And mine," Avery added, showing her badge. "Did Mason ever mention I worked white-collar crimes before becoming a financial analyst?" "No?" Guess he wasn't the only one living a double life. Jessica screamed obscenities as they led her away. Mason remained silent, his perfect facade finally shattered. Before they took him, he looked back at me one last time. "I loved you once," he said. "No," I replied. "You loved what you could take from me. There's a difference." The agents led them both away, leaving me with Avery in the suddenly quiet room. "You okay?" she asked. I touched my throat where Mason's fingers had left marks, feeling nothing but relief. "I will be." "What happens now?" "Now?" She smiled. "Now we make sure they never hurt anyone else again." I walked out of the facility into bright sunlight, leaving behind the remnants of Mason's carefully constructed lies. The truth had finally set me free. The courthouse steps felt colder than I remembered from the preliminary hearings. Mason and Jessica's sentencing had drawn a crowd, former clients, journalists, and other victims who'd come forward after the story broke. Catherine Porter's mother clutched my hand as we waited. "I never thought we'd see justice," she whispered. "For 8 years, I knew he killed her." I squeezed her hand back, remembering the perfume on Mason's shirt that started everything. Such a small detail that unraveled such an elaborate web of lies. The doors opened. Reporters surged forward as Mason and Jessica emerged in handcuffs. Their designer clothes were gone, replaced by prison orange that made Jessica's face look sallow. Mason's eyes found mine in the crowd, but his manipulative charm had vanished. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. 25 years, Avery said beside me, her FBI badge catching the morning light. No possibility of parole. Jessica stumbled on the steps. No one moved to help her. The sister-in-law who'd once commanded every room with entitled confidence now couldn't meet anyone's gaze. Trinity. Mason called out as they led him toward the prison transport. It didn't have to end this way. I didn't respond. He'd lost the power to compel my attention, my reactions, my anything. Instead, I turned to Catherine's mother. Would you like to get coffee? I think we have stories to share. Later, in a quiet cafe, I sorted through the last of Mason's papers. Our house had sold quickly once the scandal broke. Most of the money went to his victims' families, which felt right. I kept only what I'd brought into the marriage and the evidence of his crimes. You never told me, Avery said, sliding into the booth. How did you know I was FBI? I didn't. I smiled, remembering her perfect timing at the facility. I just knew you weren't what Mason thought you were. None of us were. Speaking of unexpected things. She pulled out a folder, similar to the one that had started all this. We found more accounts. Offshore holdings, shell companies. He was worse than we thought. No, I closed the folder without looking. He was exactly what I thought he was, in the end. A lie trying to look like love. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother asking about dinner. The key she'd given me still hung on my keychain, but I hadn't needed it. I'd found my own way home. The media wants interviews, Avery mentioned. Your story could help other women recognize the signs. Maybe someday. I stood, gathering my things. But right now, I want to focus on recognizing myself again. Outside, autumn leaves skittered across the courthouse steps where justice had finally been served. Catherine's mother had cried when Mason was sentenced, but I hadn't. My tears had dried up somewhere between finding that perfume and discovering the truth about his other victims. Trinity? Avery called as I reached my car. There's something else. Another case, similar pattern. We could use your insight. I paused, key in the ignition. Part of me wanted to drive away, leave all this behind. But another part remembered how alone I'd felt before finding Catherine's story, before connecting the dots that led to other victims. Send me the files, I said. But not today. Today I'm having dinner with my parents. She nodded, understanding. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of the prison transport in my rearview mirror, carrying Mason and Jessica to their new life. I didn't watch it disappear. My phone buzzed again, a group text from the victims' support network we'd formed. Women sharing stories, warnings, triumph. Some seeking revenge, others justice, all finding strength in breaking their silence. I turned toward my parents' house, where dinner and normal conversation waited. The weight of Mason's betrayal had lifted, replaced by something unexpected, not just survival or revenge or even justice. But a quiet certainty that I could trust myself again. Sometimes that's the best revenge of all.
"10 years ago, I married my wife, but before we tied the knot, her parents insisted that I sign a prenup. At the time, I found it deeply insulting because their behavior made it clear they didn't fully accept me into their family. The prenup felt like another slap in the face. Back then, I was working in book sales when I met my wife, and after a year of being together, I made the decision to leave my job and start my own boutique business. We were both 26 years old at the time, and by the time I officially launched my business, I was almost 25. My wife supported me throughout the whole process, and she was thrilled when I finally started working on my dream business. However, her parents were far from happy. They seemed to think that I was relying entirely on my wife, living off her money. While it was true that she was helping me financially during the early stages of my business, I wasn't completely dependent on her. Despite that, my in-laws seemed to view me as a burden. At 32, I proposed to my wife, and we planned to get married within a year. But a few months before the wedding, her parents approached me with a demand. I had to sign a prenup that would ensure all of our assets and money remained separate. In the event of a divorce, I would not be entitled to any of her assets, and vice versa. On top of that, I would have to repay her and her parents for the financial support they had given me during the early stages of my business. It felt like a constant reminder that I was somehow indebted to them, which I thought was unnecessary and unfair at the time. The prenup also stated that if we ever open a joint account, the money would be divided based on who contributed more, assuming that my wife would always be the one supporting me financially. It felt like my in-laws had already assumed I would never succeed on my own and that my wife would always be the primary breadwinner. When they presented this prenup, they told me it was the only way they would feel comfortable accepting me as their son-in-law. This was insulting for several reasons. First, it showed that they thought I would always rely on my wife and that I would never make anything of myself. I was already working hard to build my business and ensure I wasn't a burden on anyone. Second, even before I decided to leave my job and start my own company, my in-laws never liked me. From the very first time my wife introduced me to them, they made it clear they didn't think I was good enough to date their daughter. And by good enough, I mean rich enough. For context, my in-laws run a successful factory. Fast forward to now, 10 years later, my business has grown significantly, and I am now worth 5 times more than my in-laws. But instead of congratulating me or offering support, they're trying to have the prenup dissolved and are even attempting to convince my wife to divorce me. It's shocking how things have turned around, and it feels like their attitude toward me hasn't changed at all. What once seemed like a gesture of caution has now turned into an attempt to take advantage of my success. Since they first started, they've been doing quite well. They come from wealthy families, so they've always had comfortable lives. My parents, on the other hand, had regular jobs. My dad was a high school football coach, and my mom managed the bakery shop nearby. We weren't struggling, but we certainly didn't have the kind of money my in-laws had. Right from the start, they made it clear that they looked down on me. It was the usual snide remarks and sarcastic comments, often disguised as jokes. The whole atmosphere around them was just uncomfortable and rude. I never said anything about it, even though my wife got very upset by their behavior. I didn't want them to know they had affected me. I believed that the best way to deal with them was to ignore them completely. After all, my wife loved me and I loved her, and that was enough. We didn't need their approval. When they brought up the idea of a prenup before the wedding, I felt insulted, but I signed it anyway. My wife was offended when they presented it to her, but we had talked about it beforehand, and she signed it without a fuss. We both understood exactly what they were trying to do. They wanted to create tension, to see if I'd back off, and to try to undermine me before our wedding. They wanted to drive a wedge between us, and perhaps even get their daughter to be with someone they deemed more suitable in their eyes. Unfortunately for them, that hasn't worked. My wife and I have always been on the same side, and we always will be. That was several years ago, and since then, I've made significant progress in my career. My business has grown steadily, and over the last 1 year, it exploded. Everything I had worked for, especially my efforts in social media marketing, finally started to pay off. Now, I'm worth almost 5 times as much as my in-laws. A few days ago, they came over for dinner. After our son went to bed, they asked us to sit down. They told us they'd been thinking a lot about the prenup and now thought it was time to have it dissolved. My wife looked surprised, and I was shocked for a moment, too. But I quickly decided to refuse their request. I told them directly that I didn't think it was necessary to discuss the prenup again. After all, they had made it clear from the start that the prenup was the only way they would feel comfortable with me marrying their daughter. I didn't want to take away something that was supposed to make them feel secure. I was being sarcastic when I said it, but I think they picked up on that even though I tried to sound sincere. They responded by saying that a lot of time had passed since then, and now that we had a child together, they didn't have any more doubts about me. Still, I politely declined to revisit the conversation, telling them that I wasn't open to discussing it further. When I said this, they got upset and insisted that it was their idea to begin with, and now that they didn't think it was needed anymore, I should respect their decision to have the prenup dissolved. They argued that, since they were older and more experienced, I should trust their advice to avoid any potential issues down the road. To be honest, I didn't fully understand what they were talking about. After some back and forth, I told them again that I wasn't interested in discussing the prenup anymore, and since my wife and I weren't planning on divorcing anytime soon, they should just let it go. But they wouldn't stop, and the conversation quickly turned into a full-blown argument. All the unresolved issues that we had been avoiding for years started coming up. Finally, I pointed out that the reason they had insisted on the prenup in the first place was to humiliate me. They wanted to make sure I knew I wasn't in the same financial position as them, and it felt like they were trying to remind me of my place. But now that I had done well for myself and surpassed them financially, they suddenly wanted to act like none of that had ever happened. They argued that they were only trying to protect their daughter's future, just in case I turned out to be a gold digger who would take advantage of her. They said the prenup was a safety net to ensure she would be protected, and they were just looking out for her. The argument went on for a while, but eventually I got too tired of fighting. I told them that I had had enough and needed them to leave. I thought this was reasonable because we were being too loud and my son was sleeping in the next room. I didn't want to disturb him, especially since it was late. I just wanted the whole situation to be over so I could get some rest and clear my head. But they took offense to that, accusing me of forgetting that I'd gotten to where I was today because of the support they and their daughter had given me. I had to disagree with them on that. While I appreciated the occasional help they gave when my business was still struggling, that support had always been for their daughter, not for me. There were times when they would send money, but it was never for me personally. It was because my wife sometimes struggled with household expenses and she would ask her parents for help. I had always offered to dip into my savings, but she preferred to turn to her parents, knowing they had the funds. But we could have gotten by without their financial help if needed. It wasn't as if they had been supporting me directly. At this point, I had just had enough. I didn't want to keep arguing anymore, and I hoped that, in time, they would understand why I felt the way I did. But for now, all I wanted was for them to leave, so we could all move on from this tense situation. They had no problem supporting our relationship as long as it benefited their daughter. In fact, they only helped us because of her, not because they had any real faith in me. I've always felt like an outsider to them, never truly accepted as part of their family. They had no right to say that I wouldn't be where I am today without their support, because the truth is, I could have easily achieved everything on my own. They didn't play a role in my success, so it felt wrong for them to throw it in my face like that. When I said that to them, they got furious and the argument only escalated. They accused me of being ungrateful for their so-called support. At one point, they turned to my wife and told her she needed to make a decision. They claimed they had tried their best to support our relationship, but now things had gone too far because I wouldn't acknowledge their help. They insisted that since I refused to give them credit, it was time for her to choose between them and me. Somehow, my wife managed to get them to leave, but since that day, we haven't spoken. She still keeps in touch with her parents, trying to get them to apologize, but I've told her I don't need an apology. I just want space from them. They can continue to have a relationship with our son if they want, but I've made it clear that I'm not interested in fixing things with them, especially after everything that happened the other day. The truth is, this argument had been building up for a long time. I'm surprised it took this long for us to finally have this emotional confrontation, but now that it's out in the open, I'm done. I want to stay away from them for good. But recently, I found out something that's made everything even more complicated. My wife told me that while she was trying to convince her parents to apologize to me, they were actually trying to manipulate her into divorcing me. Last night, she showed me a series of messages from them. She was clearly upset, and I could tell she had been working hard to fix things, hoping to get our family back to normal. My son really loves his grandparents, and she didn't want things to get awkward. I understand that, but after reading those messages, I'm having second thoughts about everything. In those messages, they refused to acknowledge that they had ever treated me poorly. They acted as if they had every right to humiliate me, claiming their actions were justified. On top of that, they accused me of being ungrateful for their support, which I still don't believe they ever truly offered, and they used that as an excuse to tell my wife that she should consider divorcing me. According to them, I don't love her enough to respect her family, and because I've started making some money, they implied that I was somehow suspicious and might be after her wealth. It's all a bunch of nonsense they're feeding her to try to get her to turn against me. They want her to believe that divorcing me is the only way forward, and I'm honestly furious. I don't want to be part of that manipulative game, and I'm not willing to play along. She's not buying any of it. She's just too tired of trying to make them understand. The only thing she does agree with is that, at the start, my in-laws did offer some financial support, even though it was mostly because they didn't want to say no to their daughter. It wasn't really because of me, and, to be honest, I'm not eager to acknowledge that help because if my wife had allowed me, I would have used my own savings to contribute back then. We wouldn't have needed their help at all. The truth is, my in-laws never really accepted me into their family. They always made me feel like I was with my wife only for the money. It wasn't like I wasn't affected by that, though. I had to deal with the consequences of their attitudes. So, I can't bring myself to be thankful for the financial support they gave us when I was just starting my business. I don't mind dissolving the prenup. It's just the timing that bothers me. My wife and I recently made some big purchases together, but they're all in my name. It's not a problem for either of us because we trust each other and are committed to making things work, no matter what. We're not fighting, but my wife has her opinion, and I'm considering it. Divorce isn't an option for us. But I think my in-laws have been doing some thinking on their own, which is why they're bringing this up now. The problem for me is the timing. Even now, they're still suspicious of me. They say they care about my wife and want the best for her, but it's clear they think I don't, and that's why they always seem to put me down. It's obvious they still haven't fully accepted me into their family, and that's what bothers me. As for the financial support they gave us early on, I haven't repaid them yet, but if they ask, I have no problem paying it back. The reason I haven't offered to repay them on my own is because I don't feel like I owe them. Once my business started doing well, my wife didn't have to spend a penny of her own money. I've taken care of everything. At this point, I think we're square. Any money they gave us was for their daughter, and it went directly to her, not to me. Since my business started to do well, my wife hasn't had to spend much on personal expenses either, so I believe my debt, in a way, has been repaid. Still, if my in-laws want me to pay them back now, I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to get them off my back. I've made my decision. I've decided to pay them back the money they claim to have lent us. While some may have mixed views on this, I feel that it's the best way to handle things. The amount of money is not fixed. It's just a figure that feels right to me, especially now that I'm doing well financially. I don't want to owe them anything, and I'm tired of feeling like I'm constantly in their debt, having to live up to some impossible expectation that I should worship them forever. I want to be able to stand up for myself without them throwing their financial support in my face. The only way to resolve this is by repaying them for everything they claim to have done for us when we were starting out. I talked to my wife about this, and she agrees with me. She's tired of her parents constantly pressuring her to divorce me, just because they think I've disrespected them. They've never acknowledged that they've treated me, and even my family, with disrespect on several occasions. If they can't handle me responding to them in the same way they've treated me and my family over the years, then I don't believe they have the right to demand respect in the first place. I think I've been quite polite with them, at least at the beginning before the arguments got personal and they started attacking me below the belt. But the truth is, they've never been kind to me. From day one, they've been openly hostile and never pretended to like me or my family. After all these years of trying to suppress my feelings and be respectful, I believe that paying them back will mean I no longer owe them anything. They've never supported me emotionally, nor have they ever made an effort to accept me as part of their family. Both my wife and I are exhausted by this situation, and we're hoping that writing them a check will bring an end to it. I know that in relationships, simply throwing money at a problem doesn't solve anything. But with them, I think it's the only way forward. They are incredibly materialistic and selfish, and it seems like money is the only thing that matters to them. It's hard to imagine any parents who would try to destroy their daughter's marriage, especially with a child involved, just to protect their own egos. Their actions say a lot about how little they actually care for her, despite pretending to have her best interests at heart. What they really care about is their image, their own pride, and their own comfort. Earlier today, my wife spoke to her parents and told them that I'm ready to pay them back and end all of this. It's been exhausting for all of us, and she feels the 10 of it too. Since all of this started over money, maybe settling the financial part will finally bring some peace. But as expected, they didn't take it well. They were offended by the very suggestion that I would repay them, and things are far from being resolved. It feels like they could easily be bought, and it's hard to take them seriously. They told my wife that this whole situation wasn't about money, which is odd because when we were fighting the other day, it seemed like money was the only thing they cared about. But now, all of a sudden, it's about respect, something I've never shown them, according to them. This is completely ridiculous because, if anything, I could say the same about them. My wife and I honestly don't even know where they're coming from because I've always been polite and civil with them. It's always been them who've had a problem with me, and I've never once disrespected them. They seem to think that because I didn't express enough gratitude for the little help they gave us at the start, it justifies years of taking advantage of my love for their daughter, constantly provoking me and my family. It doesn't make sense. I've never treated them badly, but they've always been disrespectful. Now, they seem to think that their one act of helping us early on means they've done enough to demand my respect, when in reality, they've been trying to undermine me and my family the whole time. Even my wife is starting to see through their claims that they helped us more than they actually did. I've already made it clear that I will pay them back, so I won't owe them anything. So if this is about respect instead of money, then I don't feel like I owe them anything at all. They haven't done anything to deserve it. Right now, they're not even speaking to me directly. They're only communicating with my wife. Thankfully, my wife is completely on my side, but they're still trying to manipulate her into filing for a divorce. They've even started telling her that she needs to take our son under her wing, as if that's their concern. At this point, I can't imagine ever having a normal relationship with them again. It's ridiculous that ruining our marriage isn't enough for them. Now they want to push for custody of our son just to feed their own egos. To me, that's enough reason to have no respect for them whatsoever. This is the kind of treatment I've been getting from them ever since I met my wife. My wife hasn't responded to them. She feels like it's a lost cause now. She tried everything she could to explain to her parents why they were wrong, but all they did was pressure her to get a divorce. She got tired of fighting alone, especially since they've made it clear that they're not interested in fixing things. So, she stopped replying to them. But today, they showed up at her house. I was the one who answered the door, and they completely ignored me. They just walked right in and started calling for my wife. At this point, I'm not even surprised by their behavior. They've accused me of being disrespectful, but all they do is act like hypocrites. I didn't say a word, just waited for my wife to come out. When she did, she immediately told them she wasn't interested in speaking with them unless they were ready to hear our side. That's when they started accusing her of becoming just like me, disrespectful. They told her that if I owed them anything, so did she, and that she shouldn't forget it. She immediately lost her temper and began shouting at them, which, to be honest, was completely understandable. She was their daughter, after all. They had never asked for anything in return for the things they had done for her. They had chosen to help out of their own free will. And now, they had no right to hold it against her. If they had really wanted to avoid getting involved, they could have simply said no, and we would have figured things out without their help. It's not like other parents don't do similar things for their children, but they do it out of love and care, not with the expectation of throwing it back in their faces later, like my in-laws. As for gratitude, we had always done our best to show them respect and appreciation, even though their behavior toward me and my family over the years had often been ridiculous. Despite all of that, we never said a word and quietly put up with it because we didn't want to create unnecessary drama. We just wanted to maintain peace in the family and show them the respect they felt entitled to. But now, it had reached a point where we couldn't stay silent anymore. They had to realize that respect isn't something you can just demand. It's something you have to earn. This was one of those times where they needed to understand that. My wife ended up arguing with them for a long time, but I stayed quiet, standing off to the side, because I didn't want to get involved. After a while, though, I could see that my wife was getting frustrated, so I stepped in to support her and help calm her down. That's when my in-laws started blaming me for everything. They claimed this whole situation started because I refused to dissolve the prenup. I had to correct them right away. I told them this mess didn't start because of that. It started when they decided to treat me poorly just because I wasn't from the same wealthy background they had expected their daughter to marry into. That's what they had been upset about all along. It was never about anything else. They had treated me badly for all these years, but I had kept quiet and tried to avoid making a big deal of it. But now, they couldn't continue getting away with it. It was time they realized their actions had consequences. I refused to dissolve the prenup because I needed to make it clear that I wasn't going to be manipulated or controlled by anyone. I wasn't going to be a puppet just doing what they wanted. Things quickly escalated after that, especially since I was now directly involved in the situation. But I remained calm and didn't let their words or actions affect me. They shouted at me, called me horrible names, and tried to provoke me in every way, hoping to get a reaction. But I refused to let them succeed because I knew that was exactly what they were trying to do. The more I stayed calm, the more frustrated they became. Eventually, they realized that they couldn't get under my skin, and that made them even more upset. At that point, they turned to my wife, telling her she had to choose between them and me. She didn't hesitate. She chose her family, meaning she chose me and our son. She told her parents to leave her house and made it clear that they would soon receive the check. This was the end of things between us and them. Her parents were shocked because they had obviously expected her to side with them, as that's what usually happens in situations like this. But my wife and I had had enough. When they tried to argue further, my wife told them that if they didn't leave immediately, she would call the police and have them removed. They finally left, and we took the step of blocking them everywhere, on all our social media and communication channels. We made the decision to cut them out of our lives completely. It's going to be tough to explain to our son why he won't be able to see his grandparents anymore, but we're okay. He has another set of grandparents who love him just as much. Maybe one day we'll be able to reconcile with my wife's parents, but for now, this is what had to be done. We tried so hard to make things work with them, but they only wanted things to go their way, and that was never going to happen. I'm honestly relieved that I stood up for myself, and I'm proud of my wife for doing the same. Some issues had to be addressed, and we're finally at peace with how we handled the situation. We're happy to move forward, knowing we've made the right decision for our family. In 2022, I was overjoyed to hear about my stepmother Sophia's pregnancy. Sophia, a painting teacher with a natural affinity for kids, had been a significant part of my life since she married my dad when I was 10. Although my parents had divorced 4 years earlier, and I harbored dreams of their reunion, Sophia's patience and kindness helped me adjust to our new family dynamic. Sophia and I shared numerous activities: shopping, cooking, and movie nights. She even taught me to drive, a task my mother, a busy surgeon, couldn't find time for. Despite my mom's demanding schedule, she loved me deeply and focused on preparing me for the future, such as college applications and career advice. I felt fortunate to have 4 supportive parents, each contributing uniquely to my upbringing. However, everything changed in 2023 during the initial COVID-19 lockdowns. Planned to be a short-term arrangement due to my mother's intense hospital shifts and exposure risks, I started living continuously with my dad and Sophia. Initially, the lockdown felt almost adventurous. Schools were closed, Sophia was home from work, and we engaged in various bonding activities like baking and starting a vegetable garden. But around 4 months into her pregnancy, Sophia's demeanor shifted dramatically. The warm, joking atmosphere soured as she began to snap over trivial matters. Minor infractions, like leaving a cup in the living room or shoes by the door, escalated into significant conflicts. This change was sudden and disheartening, transforming our home from a sanctuary into a tense environment. Confused and hurt by her altered behavior, which contradicted the loving relationship we had built, I struggled to understand the cause. My dad suggested that I might be doing something wrong, implying that Sophia's hostility must have a justified basis. This accusation and the ongoing stress at home led me to consider running away. Feeling isolated and unwelcome, I retreated to my room, limiting my presence in shared spaces to avoid further confrontations. My days became a series of strategic movements, sneaking out only when necessary and hoarding snacks and water to minimize interactions. Recently, this painful period resurfaced in my thoughts, prompting me to seek external perspectives. I've shared my story anonymously, as I'm looking for unbiased advice and insights into my situation, which remains a perplexing and painful chapter in my life. Once they were done eating, I'd quickly grab whatever food I could find and head straight back to my room. That's where I spent most of my days, just me, my laptop, and my thoughts. I did my schoolwork online, watched Netflix, and texted my friends. Honestly, I barely changed out of my pajamas. I figured, why bother? No one was going to see me anyway. I kept to myself as much as possible. Once a day, usually when Sophia took a nap, I'd rush to clean the parts of the house that were my responsibility. I became obsessive about it, almost paranoid. I didn't want to leave behind any sign that I existed. I wiped the shower after using it, made sure there weren't any hairs left in the drain, cleaned the toothpaste from the sink, and even scrubbed the microwave and counters if I touched them. I was basically trying to become invisible. Still, even with me living like a ghost, Sophia always found something to get upset about. One day, she stormed into my room yelling that it smelled so bad it was making her sick. I looked around, completely confused. I had cleaned everything that morning, vacuumed the floor, changed the sheets, opened the window to let in fresh air. The only thing out of place was half a bag of chips on my desk. I pointed that out, thinking it would clear things up, but instead, she just burst into tears. "You don't understand how hard this is for me," she sobbed before running out of my room. A few minutes later, my dad came in. He looked tired, like always. He comforted her, then came to talk to me. His excuse was the same as always. Sophia was pregnant, stressed from the lockdown, and struggling with not seeing her family. Pregnancy is hard on a woman's body, he said for what felt like the 100th time. Her hormones are all over the place. Smells bother her. Emotions run high. She's scared for the baby, especially with the virus going around. I understood all that. I really did. But something felt different, like it wasn't just about pregnancy. It felt personal, like she hated me. I asked my dad if I had done something wrong, if there was something I could change or fix. But he just told me I needed to give her more space and be more understanding. But how much more space could I give? I barely existed in that house anymore. My mental health started to spiral. I felt like trash, like something my dad might throw out any day. I was constantly afraid my mom, who worked at the hospital, might get sick with COVID. My hair started falling out in clumps. I'd find it on my pillow in the morning, in the drain after a shower. I lost weight because I was too anxious to eat. I couldn't sleep, and when I did, I had nightmares. Most days I just felt numb. Some days, I would stare at the wall for hours, just completely empty inside. I tried talking to my dad a few times. I always waited until Sophia was asleep and asked if we could talk, but it was never a good time. He always said, later, but later never came. One time, I tried bringing it up at dinner. I know, dumb move. Sophia stormed off, and my dad gave me this disappointed look, like I'd ruined the whole evening. He followed her out to comfort her, like always. I texted my mom once, wanting to tell her everything. But she was working 17-hour shifts and always sounded so exhausted when she called. One time, she asked if I was okay and I almost broke down. But then she told me about a 37-year-old patient who had died that day, and I felt like my problems were nothing compared to that. So I stayed quiet. I did talk to my friends on FaceTime sometimes, but it wasn't the same. Everyone was dealing with their own problems during COVID. My best friend was the only one who truly understood. I could talk to her for hours. She never made me feel like I was being dramatic or annoying. Honestly, without those calls, I don't know how I would have made it through. Then, one day, everything snapped. It was a Saturday in late July. I had been living like this for about 4 months. Around 7:27 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal. I thought everyone had already eaten and gone back to their rooms. I was just scrolling through a story on my phone, waiting for my cereal to get soggy. Yeah, I'm one of those weird people who hate crunchy cereal. In that moment, I actually felt a little normal, like maybe I was allowed to exist outside my room. Then Sophia walked in. She sighed loudly when she saw me, like just my presence ruined her day. She was about 7 months pregnant by then, always holding her belly, like she was protecting the baby from me. She started cleaning the kitchen, even though it was already spotless, because I had cleaned it earlier. She slammed cabinet doors and muttered under her breath about some people living in filth. Then, out of nowhere, she grabbed my cereal bowl, an actual ceramic one, not some plastic thing, and threw the whole thing into the trash. Not just the cereal, the entire bowl. I lost it. After months of being quiet, of walking on eggshells, something inside me broke. I started yelling, asking her what her problem was with me. I called her abusive. I said she was trying to make me miserable, trying to push me out of the house. I asked what changed, why she hated me now when we used to get along. My dad rushed in and got between us. Sophia was crying again, clutching her stomach like I was a threat. She said she didn't feel safe with me in the house. She told my dad I needed to leave. He walked me to my room, his face red with anger. Then he said something I'll never forget, the words that ruined everything between us. "You must be doing something to her," he said. "No one hates a kid for no reason. If you keep stressing her out, you'll have to move out. Sophia and the baby are my priority now." And just like that, I realized I wasn't. Everything changed so fast, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was told that if I couldn't act appropriately, I couldn't stay in the house anymore. Then, to make things worse, he actually said I might be jealous of the baby and just acting out because of that. It felt so unfair. I wasn't jealous. I was struggling, and nobody seemed to care. I tried to stay calm and patient, I really did. But then he said something that completely broke me. He told me I needed to grow up and start thinking about someone other than myself. That hurt, especially coming from the man who had watched me slowly fade into the background, becoming more withdrawn every day, and never once asked if I was okay. After he left the room, I just sat on my bed and cried. I must have been there for an hour, maybe more. Then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I made a post on social media, explaining everything. I told people how Sophia had changed, how my dad had taken her side, and how I didn't feel safe or wanted there anymore. I asked if anyone had a place I could stay, just for a while, because I had nowhere else to go. I didn't want to upset my mom, who is still in the hospital, so I figured it was better to find a temporary solution on my own. I packed a small bag. Just the essentials, some clothes, my laptop, phone charger, a few personal things like my childhood teddy bear, and the necklace my mom gave me for my 15th birthday. I didn't take much, because part of me still believed I might be able to come back in a few days when things cooled down. Then, around 6:27 in the afternoon on a hot July day, I climbed out of my bedroom window and walked away from the only home I had ever known. As I walked down the street, I remember thinking how strange it was that everything around me looked so normal, like the world hadn't just shattered for me. After a while, messages started pouring in. So many people responded to my post, offering support, asking if I was okay, even offering a place to stay. It meant more to me than I can explain. Eventually, I messaged my best friend and asked if I could come over. Without hesitation, she said yes. I turned off my phone shortly after because my dad and Sophia started calling and texting like crazy. I couldn't face them. I knew if I heard my dad's voice, I'd either break down or say something I'd regret forever. I got to friend's house around 2:27 p.m. Her parents had always been kind to me, and when I briefly told them what happened, her mom gave me the warmest hug and told me I could stay for as long as I needed. They set up an air mattress in friend's room, and her mom even made my favorite meal for dinner. They didn't force me to talk. They just let me breathe. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Later that night, I used friend's phone to text my mom. I let her know I was okay and explained what had happened. She didn't respond for a while because she was in surgery most of the day, but when she finally called, she was calm. She wasn't angry, just worried and relieved. She said my aunt would come pick me up the next day, and I could stay with her until we figured out what to do. That night, friend and I stayed up late talking. Being there, where no one was glaring at me or blaming me for things I didn't do, felt like such a relief. I almost felt guilty for how good it felt to be away from that house. The next morning, my mom called again. She talked to friends' parents to thank them, then spoke to me. She told me my dad and Sophia had been freaking out. They'd even called the police, but because I was 16 and had posted online that I was safe, the police didn't consider it an emergency. My dad and Sophia had gone door to door looking for me, asking friends and family if they'd seen me. My mom reassured them I was safe and told them I'd be staying with Aunt for a couple of weeks until we figured out the next steps. She told me my dad was relieved, but also really upset about the way I left and what I'd written online about Sophia. What I didn't know at the time was that my post had caused a ripple. People started reaching out to my dad and Sophia, old teachers, neighbors, friends, parents. They all wanted to know what was going on and why I had felt the need to leave home so publicly. My dad and Sophia tried to brush it off as typical teen drama, but people weren't buying it. Especially my grandparents, my dad's parents, who had always been protective of me. They were so upset when they heard what happened that they drove 6 hours just to confront my dad in person. According to my aunt, there was a huge argument. My grandfather even told my dad he had failed as a father. To this day, they barely speak to him because of how he treated me. Family gatherings are super tense now. I stayed with Aunt for those 10 weeks. She's my mom's sister and has always been the cool aunt, the one who let me stay up late and watch movies I probably shouldn't have as a kid. Her apartment was small, but she made space for me. She turned her home office into a temporary bedroom and made sure I felt supported. For the first few days, nothing major happened. It was quiet. I kept waiting for some dramatic confrontation or for my dad to show up demanding I come back, but he never did. Eventually, my aunt and I drove to the house so she could pick up more of my things. I stayed in the car while she went inside. She said Dad and Sophia were polite but cold. A few days later, she went back alone and packed up the rest of my room. I refused to set foot in that house again. She brought back all my clothes, books, posters, everything she could fit in her car. Some bigger stuff had to stay behind, but I didn't care. I just wanted my personal things. Somehow, even though she was swamped at work, my mom managed to take a 5-week leave from the hospital. It was almost impossible to do during COVID times, but she did it anyway. She rented a small 2-bedroom apartment near her work so we could start fresh. And that's when things finally started to feel like they might be okay again. When she went back to work, I stayed with her. It wasn't ideal. She still worked long hours and wasn't home much, but it was still better than being with Dad and Sophia. At least with her, I felt safe. Over the next few months, my dad tried to reach out. He called a few times, but I never answered. He sent texts saying he missed me and that Sophia was doing better. He even apologized, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The pain was still too fresh, and I couldn't forget what he said. No one hates a kid for no reason. That sentence haunted me. What kind of father says that to his child? Since then, I haven't spoken to my dad. I've also never met my half-brother, who's almost 4 now. I've seen photos of him on social media. Mutual family friends still tag them sometimes. What's strange is how much he looks like me when I was his age. Every time I see a picture, I feel this strange mix of curiosity and sadness. I often wonder, has anyone told him about me? Does he know he has a big sister? Sophia and my dad still try to reach out occasionally. They send cards for my birthday and Christmas, and sometimes they'll text. Last year, they sent me an article about prenatal depression, something about how pregnant women can sometimes experience irrational anger toward people or pets because of hormones. I don't know if that's true, or just an excuse. Either way, it doesn't change what happened. You don't get to treat someone like garbage for months and then expect a scientific article to magically fix it. That's not how healing works. I'm turning 19 in 5 weeks. We're planning a small birthday party at my mom's house, just close family and friends. Yesterday, my cousin's girlfriend, Hazel, asked me if I planned to invite my dad. Don't you think it's time to mend fences? She said. He's still your father. I told her absolutely not. She asked why, and I ended up telling her everything, probably more than I should have. But I needed her to understand that this wasn't just some teenage grudge. This was deep. This was trauma. After I finished, Hazel said something that really upset me. She told me that while what they did was wrong, what I did was wrong too. She said I'd made everyone worry and caused unnecessary stress. She even blamed me for putting a pregnant woman with mental health issues in a risky situation by running away and posting about it on social media instead of calling someone. You were almost an adult, she said. You could have taken an Uber or called your mom. Then she brought up my half-brother. She said it wasn't fair that I'd never tried to meet him, that he didn't do anything wrong. And suddenly I started second-guessing everything. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I was the bad guy too. After that conversation with Hazel, I decided to uninvite her from my birthday party. I was hurt. Her words made me feel like I should be guilty for protecting myself. My mom fully supported the decision. She said Hazel had no right to say what she did, and we agreed that the party should just be close family anyway. A few days later, James came over. He looked really uncomfortable, kept messing with his phone, wouldn't make eye contact. Eventually, he told me Hazel had a rough past with her own younger siblings. Apparently, she lived with her dad, and her siblings lived with their mom. There was some big falling out when she was in high school, and things got really bad between them. She was later diagnosed with bipolar disorder in college and went through therapy. Even though she's tried to make peace with her siblings, they still won't talk to her, and it breaks her heart. James said that hearing my story triggered something in her. I guess she saw herself in both me and Sophia, like it brought back her own guilt and pain. After our conversation, she sent me texts, links to articles about mental health, family healing, even Reddit threads. It felt like too much. She barely knows my family, but suddenly wanted to fix everything. I didn't respond, and I think that made her double down even harder. James told me she wanted to meet up in person to apologize. I agreed, thinking maybe I had been too harsh. She offered to pick me up and drive to a new restaurant in the next town as a sort of pre-birthday treat. It seemed sweet at first, but something felt off. I told my mom about it, and she immediately got suspicious. Why the next town? Why insist on driving me? Why not just meet at a local place? Turns out, our instincts were right. Sophia, of all people, ended up calling my mom to warn her. She told her that Hazel had contacted her, trying to coordinate some big surprise reunion between me, Sophia, and my dad. That was her plan all along. I couldn't believe it. She had no right. After that, I realized I needed closure, not from Hazel, but from my dad. So I wrote him a letter. A long one. 7 pages. I poured everything out. I told him how his choices made me feel abandoned, betrayed, invisible. I told him that even now, I sometimes shrink myself down in other people's homes, trying not to be a burden because I was made to feel like one for so long. I told him I wanted a relationship with my brother someday, but I wasn't sure I wanted one with him. And that if I ever changed my mind, it would be on my terms, with my mom present. I asked him to stop reaching out until I was ready. Writing that letter felt like releasing something heavy I'd been carrying for years. I cried while writing parts of it, but when it was done, I felt lighter. My mom dropped it off for me. She said my dad looked surprised but took it without saying much. The next day, he asked to meet with her. They talked for about an hour. She told me later that he cried. I don't know what's going to happen next. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I've taken a step toward healing on my terms. I've only seen my dad do something like this twice in my whole life. The other day, he and Sophia brought up the idea of me possibly meeting my brother. Then, out of nowhere, my dad said he wants to buy me a car with no strings attached. He also mentioned that both he and Sophia wanted to give me some money for my birthday. Honestly, you guys might judge me for this, but I'm going to accept the car and the $727. If he offers more, I'm taking that too.
Why?
Because college is expensive. Between moving into a dorm and getting all the supplies I'll need, money is tight. I know it might look like I'm using him, but I don't see it that way. After everything I've been through, this feels like the least he can do. Maybe it's petty, maybe it sounds materialistic, but I'm being realistic, not emotional. It doesn't mean I forgive him. It just means I'm making smart choices for myself right now. My mom told me it's entirely my decision. She said she won't judge me no matter what I choose. Now let's talk about Hazel. Hazel went behind my back and contacted Sophia on Facebook. Sophia ended up sending screenshots of their conversation to my mom. In the messages, Hazel accused me of lying and exaggerating everything I said. Can you believe that? She was basically trying to paint me as the bad guy. To Sophia's credit, she was honest. She admitted she treated me badly during her pregnancy and said she was diagnosed with prenatal depression and anxiety. She told my mom she was getting help now and regretted how she acted back then. But it was Hazel who kept pushing the idea that Sophia was the real victim. She kept saying things like, "It must have been so hard for you dealing with a teenager during a pandemic." It was super condescending. Hazel also tried to convince Sophia to help fix the relationship between me and my dad, even though it wasn't her place. Thankfully, Sophia shut that down. She told Hazel she respected my decision to stay distant and that it wasn't up to Hazel to interfere. But then Hazel crossed a major line. She sent Sophia the location and time of a dinner we were supposed to have. She even offered to drive me there, probably so I couldn't leave. That felt really manipulative and honestly scary. Like, if I had gone, I would have had to ask a waitress to call my mom or order an Uber just to get away. My mom was furious. She shared the screenshots in the family group chat and called Hazel out. She even said that if Hazel ever came near me again, she'd seriously regret it. And trust me, my mom doesn't make threats unless she means it. I blocked Hazel and left the group chat, so I don't know what happened after that. But James, my cousin and Hazel's boyfriend, came over with my aunt. He swore he had no idea Hazel was doing all that. He looked really shocked when he read the messages. Still, he tried to defend her, saying she's been under a lot of stress. That didn't go over well. My aunt called him an idiot for dating someone so unstable, and my mom said something like, "The FF must be good if you're willing to overlook this level of crazy." It got awkward fast, and James left not long after. I turned 19 and had an amazing birthday. I finally met my brother, and it went way better than I could have hoped. I also talked to my dad and Sophia. And then there was another scary run-in with Hazel. But then, 5 days into the trip, my mom got a notification from our home security app. Someone was at our door. We checked, and it was Hazel. At first, she seemed calm, asking to talk to me. But then she started bouncing between being sad and being angry. 1 second she was saying she just wanted to help, and the next she was calling me selfish and saying I was tearing our family apart. Things escalated. She started yelling, making threats, and even damaging our front porch. She ripped our Ring camera off the wall. We were watching all of this happen from our hotel room. It was terrifying. My mom called our neighbors and they got the police involved. Hazel was arrested not far from our house, just sitting in her car like she was waiting. My mom is pressing charges for property damage and harassment. Now I understand why Hazel's own siblings want nothing to do with her. James had made it sound like their issues were just sibling drama, but no, this was something much deeper and more dangerous. For those asking, yeah, James and Hazel broke up. He's pretty shaken by it all and keeps texting me to apologize, saying he should have seen the signs. Honestly, I don't know what to think about him right now, but I'm focusing on the good. I met my brother. I feel like I'm finally starting to heal. I'm planning for college. I've got a car and a little money saved now. Things aren't perfect, but they're better. I'm finally getting to live my life on my terms. It's been a roller coaster of emotions lately. One of the most difficult parts has been watching my cousin James struggle. The whole situation with Hazel really messed him up. Even though I've told him over and over again that none of it was his fault and he couldn't have possibly known how far she would go, he still carries a lot of guilt. My aunt mentioned that he's even considering transferring to a different college. They currently go to the same one, and he's afraid of bumping into her on campus, which I understand. The drama really took a toll on him. But despite all of that going on, My birthday turned out to be amazing. Honestly, I had the best time ever. My mom and the rest of the family went out of their way to make my 19th birthday special, and I couldn't be more grateful. We didn't do anything huge or flashy. It was just a small gathering at my aunt's house with the people who truly matter. Close family only. Both sets of grandparents came, although we had to arrange for my dad's parents to come at a different time than my mom's side to avoid any potential awkwardness or tension. But it worked out fine. My aunt and uncle were there, and a few of my cousins showed up too, except for James. He was still working through everything with Hazel, so he decided to stay home. I completely understood. I got so many thoughtful and generous gifts, but the one that meant the most to me was from my little brother. He gave me a silver necklace with a small pendant that says sister. It was such a simple thing, but it meant everything to me. I'm pretty sure Dad or Sophia helped him pick it out, but just the fact that he gave it to me himself made my heart melt. I've wanted to be his big sister for so long, and now it's finally real. He's absolutely adorable. He loves a kids YouTube creator named Miss. I think she's really popular with toddlers, and he's obsessed with the color green. Everything has to be green. His cup, his plate, his shoes. It's like green is his whole identity right now. My mom and I found out he and the neighbor's cat stare each other down through the window for fun. It's hilarious because I used to do the exact same thing with a cat when I stayed at Dad's house years ago. Since meeting him, I've been spending more and more time with him, and we're starting to really bond. He even started calling me a cute nickname. He can't quite say my real name yet, but he asks about me when I'm not around. It's honestly the sweetest thing ever. The first time I met him, my dad was there too. I knew he would be because obviously, a toddler can't just hang out alone. I was told he would stay in the kitchen and give us space, and for the most part, he did. But I caught him peeking at us now and then, not in a weird way, more like he was just overwhelmed seeing us together. You could tell it meant a lot to him. When I was leaving, he followed me outside to my car. At first, he didn't say anything. He just hugged me. It was a long hug, almost a full minute, and I could tell he was holding back a lot. Then, he finally told me he missed me. I hugged him back, and told him I missed him too. That was the first time I had spoken directly to him in 4 years. After that, he apologized. Really apologized. He didn't make excuses or blame Sophia's condition like he had in the past. He owned up to everything. He told me he failed me as a father, and said he would regret that for the rest of his life. I couldn't help it. I just broke down and started crying, full-on angry crying. I let out everything I had been holding in, the hurt, the frustration, the damage it did to my mental health. I told him that I still love him, but I can't fully forgive him. Some wounds are just too deep, and some things you can't take back. He asked me if he could try to be part of my life again. I told him we could try, but I made it clear that there were no promises. We can't go back to how things used to be, and it's going to take time. He said he understood, and that he'd respect my boundaries. To his credit, he has followed through on his word so far. He gave me a used Honda Civic for my birthday like he promised. It's not brand new. The brakes squeak a little, but it runs great, and the title is in my name. No strings attached. He also gave me $2,270 for my birthday instead of the $727 we had originally talked about. I'm using it for college, mostly textbooks and stuff for my dorm. My mom has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She told me she's proud of me for being brave enough to give my dad another chance, but she also made it clear that if it ever gets too hard or starts to hurt me again, I can walk away. She's not pressuring me to forgive him, and she hasn't tried to sway me either way, which I really appreciate. When I told my dad that I got accepted to State University, which is about 5 hours away, he seemed a little sad about me moving out. But he told me he was proud of me and offered to help with the move and buying supplies. I told him I'd think about it. A part of me wants to keep some distance, but I also see that he's trying, really trying, to make things right. Now here's something nobody expected. I was the one who reached out to Sophia. After seeing how happy and well-adjusted my little brother is, I realized that maybe, just maybe, she's doing something right as a mom. I had my mom call her first to say that I wanted to talk. Sophia was shocked, of course, but agreed to speak to me. When she got on the phone, there was this long, awkward silence. Neither of us knew what to say. After a few seconds, I finally broke the ice. I told her, honestly and directly, that after everything she put me through, after all the pain she caused, I was still willing to talk. I've come to terms with the fact that things between me and Sophia will never be what they once were. There's been too much hurt, and some damage just can't be undone with a simple sorry. Still, I've decided to try being civil for my little brother's sake, not for hers or mine. He deserves a peaceful life with his family, and I don't want to create tension at his school events or special moments. When Sophia reached out, she started apologizing almost immediately. She said she's changed a lot since everything happened. According to her, she got help for the prenatal depression and anxiety she was dealing with back then. She's been in therapy and on medication ever since my brother was born. I told her I'm genuinely glad she's doing better. No child should have to grow up with a parent who's struggling with untreated mental health issues. That's not fair to them. We also talked about the whole situation with Hazel. Sophia seemed truly concerned and said that Hazel had contacted her out of the blue. She admitted she got a bad vibe from the start. Sophia even apologized again for how she treated me during her pregnancy. She said not a single day goes by where she doesn't regret it. The call lasted about 27 minutes. We talked a little about my brother, and that was pretty much it. I haven't spoken to her since, and honestly, I'm not in a hurry to. That call happened just 8 days ago, and I still need time. Later, my dad told me Sophia cried after we hung up, not because she was sad, but because she felt relieved. Apparently, she never thought I'd even agree to speak with her, and she believed I'd hate her forever. Truthfully, I kind of do. But hatred is a heavy weight to carry, and I don't have the energy to keep holding on to it. As for my dad, no, I haven't forgiven him either. He's going to have to put in a lot of effort if he wants to rebuild anything close to what we used to have. That said, it feels better to at least have him in my life in some small way. I do believe both he and Sophia regret how everything played out. But let me be clear, if I ever suspect that my little brother is being mistreated, or if they start messing around again, I will step in, and it won't be gentle. I've told my dad that to his face. Trust is something you earn, not something that just magically comes back. And right now, they've got a long way to go before I trust them. As the morning sunlight bathed the Chicago skyline, Hazel was already seated at her desk, embarking on her 7th year as a art director at the UX/UI designer Creative Impulse. Rays of light poured through her office window, casting a gentle glow on a neatly placed photo frame containing her graduation picture. Hazel, always meticulous, had her hair tied back in a ponytail and wore a navy blouse paired with a gray pantsuit, a simple yet elegant choice. Her co-workers admired her perfectionism from afar, respecting her for her commitment to quality despite sometimes keeping their distance. With a deep breath, she sipped her coffee and began sorting through her emails. A blinking notification caught her eye, a message from her mother. With a moment's hesitation, Hazel opened it. The email was a reminder about her father's upcoming birthday party, an event Hazel had mixed feelings about attending. Her mother, Eliana, a beloved mathematics teacher at Oak Park High School, had a knack for making every family gathering about her younger daughter, Isla, whom she openly favored. Hazel's relationship with her father, Hudson, who managed chief sales officer at Hunter Realty, was cordial but superficial. He celebrated her professional achievements without genuinely engaging with her on a deeper level, often overshadowing her with attention towards Isla. The mention of Isla stirred a complex blend of emotions in Hazel. Isla, a rising star in personal banking and a former cheerleading captain, seemed to effortlessly maintain a vibrant social life, much to their mother's delight. As Hazel pondered over the family dynamics, her phone vibrated. It was a call from her grandfather Luke, a retired judge whose affection and understanding she cherished deeply. "Good morning," Hazel answered, her tone brightening. "Good morning, Hazel. How are you holding up?" Luke's voice was comforting. "I'm okay, just busy as usual." "And you? Still keeping up with the youngsters?" he chuckled. Then, the conversation turned towards the birthday party. "You're coming, aren't you?" Hazel hesitated, her work often a refuge from family tensions. Sensing her reluctance, Luke gently pressed, understanding the emotional toll these gatherings took on her. "It would mean a lot to me if you could make it, Hazel." Feeling the weight of his words, Hazel agreed, unable to refuse the one family member she felt connected to. "All right, grandfather, I'll be there," she said, a mix of resignation and affection in her voice. After the call, Hazel stared out her window, reflecting on her place within the family. Labeled as serious and inflexible, she often felt like an outsider, her sincerity overlooked in favor of lighter, more frivolous interactions. Invitations to family events had become less frequent, and she sometimes anticipated rejection by filling her calendar with work. Turning back to her computer, Hazel marked the date for her father's birthday. "I wonder what excuses I'll hear this time," she muttered, returning to her tasks but inwardly longing for genuine familial acceptance and connection. On the day before the party, Hazel stood on her mother's porch, needing to use the printer for an urgent project as hers had malfunctioned. "Hazel, you came." Eliana greeted her with a formal hug, mentioning that Isla was out preparing for the party. Hazel nodded, her response subdued. "May I use the printer?" "Of course, it's in the study." "Have you thought about your father's present?" Eliana inquired. Hazel managed a small smile. "Yes, I found a vintage watch he's been wanting." "Oh, that's nice," Eliana replied, her enthusiasm noticeably lacking compared to her excitement for Isla's efforts. Hazel felt the familiar sting of being overshadowed, yet she pressed on, her resilience fueled by a desire to belong and be recognized within her family. Hazel nodded quietly and made her way upstairs to the study. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, cutting deep even though she tried hard not to let it show on her face. Her heart felt heavy. She walked into the study and turned on the computer. A password screen appeared. Hazel sighed. "Mom, what's the password?" she called out. "Oh, I changed it last week and completely forgot it," her mother, Eliana, replied. A moment later, she came upstairs holding her phone. "Just use my phone, it'll be faster." "You said the materials were emailed to you, right?" Eliana handed her the iPhone. "Here, go ahead. I just need to confirm something about the cake. I'll be back in about 30 minutes. "Okay, thanks," Hazel said softly. As soon as her mother left, Hazel let out a small sigh of relief. She opened the email app and found the file she had sent to herself. After downloading the attachment, she sent it to the printer. As the machine started printing, Hazel found herself idle, unsure of what to do next. Out of habit, she pressed the home button on her mother's phone and began swiping through the apps. One folder caught her eye: private albums. Her curiosity was instantly piqued. She whispered the words to herself, then tapped it. Inside were dozens of photo albums with labels like Isla's birthday, Florida trip 2022, Christmas dinner, family weekend. Hazel frowned. She had never heard about any of these events. She tapped on Isla's birthday. The screen filled with smiling photos of her sister Isla blowing out candles on a cake, surrounded by friends, relatives, and their parents. Hazel stared. That birthday had happened only 3 months ago. She hadn't even known it happened. Her hands trembled as she tapped on the Florida Trip 2022 album. More photos. This time of her parents and Isla laughing together on a beach in Miami. Hazel checked the date. It was the same week she had been told they couldn't take a trip because of her father's work. "They lied to me," Hazel whispered, her voice shaking. Then came Christmas dinner. Hazel had spent last Christmas alone in her apartment. Her parents had told her there were no family plans. But these photos told a different story. There was a beautiful feast, decorations, smiling faces, even her grandfather Luke had been there. She opened album after album. She wasn't in a single one. Tears filled her eyes and rolled down her cheeks. She hadn't even noticed the printer had stopped. She sat frozen until she heard the door open downstairs. "Hazel, did you finish printing?" her mother called. Quickly, Hazel exited the photo app, locked the phone, and wiped her tears. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't wipe away the hollow feeling growing inside her. "Yes, I did," she called back, her voice trembling. When her mother walked in, Hazel had already packed her things and was ready to leave. "You're heading out already?" Eliana asked, surprised.
"Yeah."
"I've still got some things to do," Hazel replied, unable to meet her mother's eyes.
"I see."
"You'll be at the party tomorrow, right?" Hazel nodded but said nothing. She hurried down the stairs. "Hazel, are you okay?" "Did something happen?" her mother asked, following behind. "Nothing. See you tomorrow," Hazel said quickly, stepping out the door. Once inside her car, Hazel leaned her forehead against the steering wheel. She finally let the tears fall freely. Everything she had felt for years, something was off, something wasn't right, was now painfully clear. She had been purposely left out of her family's life. Back in her apartment that night, Hazel couldn't sleep. Memories from the past flooded her mind, little comments, decisions, excuses. "Hazel's too busy." Hazel wouldn't enjoy that. Don't tell Hazel. She might feel hurt. Now she understood. Those were excuses to leave her out. By the time sunlight filled her apartment the next morning, Hazel had made up her mind. She picked up her phone and sent the same message to every family member. "Don't contact me anymore." Then she blocked them. Every number, every social media account, every way they could reach her. It felt strange. A mix of sadness and freedom. Chicago's spring was slowly arriving, and just like the changing season, Hazel's heart was shifting too. 3 months passed. She kept to herself, focusing fully on work. Her efforts were noticed. She had recently won an award as her marketing assistant for a major beverage campaign. At least here, her hard work was seen and appreciated. One morning, while sipping her coffee and gazing out at the city skyline from her office window, Hazel felt the ache in her heart. The pain was still there, but life was moving forward. "Hey, want to try that new yoga class this weekend?" her colleague AS asked, stopping by her desk. "I heard the instructor's amazing." Hazel smiled. AAS had become one of her closest friends since everything happened. "Yeah, I'd like that," she said. Just then, her phone buzzed. A call from an unknown number. Normally, she would ignore it, but something told her to answer. "Hello." "Hazel, it's me."
Her heart jumped.
It was her grandfather, Luke. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I had to call from a new number. I heard you blocked everyone." His voice was calm, but she could hear the sadness. "I didn't mean to block you two. No need to explain." "I understand," he said gently. "But there's something important I need to talk to you about. Could you come to my house this evening?" Hazel hesitated. "What is it?" "It's not something I can say over the phone. Please, just come." His voice had a weight she hadn't heard before. Something was different. "All right," Hazel said quietly. And with that, she hung up, her heart full of questions.
She finally said yes.
"I'll come at 3. Hazel finally agreed, her voice soft as she ended the call. After hanging up, she stood still for a moment, then slowly walked to the window, looking down at the vast city of Chicago below her. The thought of seeing her grandfather again after so long stirred a mix of emotions inside her: hope, nervousness, and a deep sadness she didn't quite understand. Her grandfather, Luke, lived in a beautiful mansion tucked away in an elegant neighborhood in the northern part of Chicago. As Hazel passed through the tall, stone gates, she couldn't help but notice how carefully the gardens were maintained. Everything looked the same, yet she felt like a stranger returning to a place that once felt like home. She rang the doorbell, and a few seconds later, the butler appeared with a warm smile. "Miss Hazel, welcome," he said politely, then led her through the grand hallway of the house. They walked in silence until they reached a room where a fire crackled gently. Her grandfather sat in a deep leather chair, facing the flames. Even though age had touched his features, Luke still looked dignified, though perhaps thinner and more tired than before. "Hazel," he said, standing up as soon as he saw her. "I'm glad you came." Without hesitation, Hazel stepped into his embrace. For the first time in a long while, she felt a little safer, a little more at ease. "I'm glad to see you well," she whispered. "Please sit." Luke gestured toward a chair near the fireplace. "There's something I need to say first. I want you to know, I don't blame you for the choices you made." Hazel nodded. unsure how to respond. Her heart felt heavy. "I know about the photographs," Luke said softly. "Eliana told me you found them." Tears formed in Hazel's eyes. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why was I the only one left out?" Luke finished the question for her. "Why were you excluded?" He paused for a moment, his expression serious. "That's what I want to talk about today." He stood, walked over to a tall bookshelf, and pulled out an old leather-bound photo album. "This," he said, handing it to her, "is our family's history. I've been recording it for many years." Hazel opened it carefully. Inside were photographs she had never seen before, pictures of her mother, Eliana, as a young girl, celebrating Christmas with her parents, and smiling alongside a woman who looked strikingly familiar. "Who is this?" Hazel asked, her voice shaky. "She looks like my mother." "That's your aunt," Luke replied gently. "Aunt? Mom had a sister?" Hazel's eyes widened with shock. Luke's voice grew quiet. "Yes, she did. Aunt died in a car accident 30 years ago." Hazel turned more pages, staring at Aunt's face. Her aunt's eyes were kind and open. There was something peaceful about her that Hazel couldn't explain. "But what does all this have to do with what happened to me?" she asked. Luke sighed deeply, clearly burdened by the past. Eliana and Aunt were very different. Aunt was outgoing, cheerful, and loved by everyone. Eliana, well, she was quieter, more reserved, and, if I'm being honest, often jealous. He paused before continuing. "When Aunt died, Eliana changed. The worst parts of her personality seemed to grow stronger. And then you were born." He looked at Hazel carefully. "You remind me of Aunt, not just in how you look, but in who you are. You're kind, honest, and thoughtful. Maybe that reminded your mother of things she didn't want to face." Hazel was speechless. She stared at the photo of her aunt, her heart pounding. "But that's still no excuse," Luke said firmly. "What your mother, your father, and Isla did to you, excluding you, lying to you, was wrong." "They told me there were no family gatherings," Hazel said quietly, wiping her eyes. "But that was a lie." "They lied to me too," Luke said with a shake of his head, anger flashing in his eyes. "They said you were too busy, that you didn't care. And I believed them. I was wrong." Tears rolled down Hazel's cheeks. "You didn't know." "If I had, I would never have allowed it," he said firmly. "But last month, Isla came to me in tears. She told me everything. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was her conscience finally waking up." Hazel looked up, stunned. "Isla?" Luke nodded. "Your distance from the family hit her harder than anyone expected. She always followed her mother's lead, but not this time." Then Luke stood and walked to his desk. He picked up a stack of formal invitations. "I've made a decision," he announced. "Next Saturday, I'm hosting a special dinner here. I've invited everyone in the family. I want you to be there." Hazel hesitated. "But I don't know if I'm ready." "This dinner is not just for reunion," Luke said, locking eyes with her. "It's for your truth, for your vindication, and I have something to tell the whole family." "What is it?" she asked, confused. "That," he said with a soft smile, "is a surprise. But I need you there. I'm proud of you, Hazel, of your strength, your heart. It's time the family saw that too." Still unsure but moved by his words, Hazel took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll come." Luke smiled, satisfied. "Good. And come dressed formally. This will be an occasion worth remembering." Saturday evening. Hazel stood outside the mansion once again. She wore a black cocktail dress, elegant yet simple, but her stomach twisted with nerves. She stepped inside. The air was filled with quiet conversation and the clink of silverware. Her parents, Eliana and Hudson, were already there, along with her sister, Isla. Eliana looked uneasy. Hudson seemed confused, unsure of how to act. Isla glanced at Hazel, with eyes full of guilt. "Hazel," Hudson said, stepping forward. "It's been a while." "Yes," Hazel replied shortly. An awkward silence fell between them until Luke entered the room, dressed in a black tuxedo, his presence commanding. "Everyone, please be seated," he said clearly. Tonight is not just a family dinner. It's something more. As the family settled around the table, Luke stood with his glass in hand. For many years, he began, I have honored the values of this family, honesty, dignity, and love. But tonight, I need to speak the truth. He looked directly at Eliana, Hudson, and Isla. I know what you did to Hazel. The lies, the exclusion, the hurt. Eliana's face turned pale. Dad, that's not. Be quiet, Luke interrupted firmly. His voice left no room for argument. I don't want to hear any more excuses, Luke said sternly, his voice firm and clear. These are not the values I raised you with. He walked across the room and stood beside Hazel. Hazel, he continued, is the most honest, hardworking, and dedicated person in this family. Everything she has achieved, she earned through her own effort. No shortcuts. No favors. Tears began to fill Hazel's eyes as Luke gently placed his hand on her shoulder. Tonight, I've made an important decision, he said, turning to face the rest of the family seated around the grand dining table. From this moment forward, I officially name Hazel as the heir to my fortune and the next leader of the Morrison family business. A stunned silence fell over the room. Eliana gasped loudly. Hudson stood halfway up from his chair in disbelief. Isla's face turned pale, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Dad, what are you saying? Eliana asked, her voice shaking. It's simple, Luke replied calmly. After I'm gone, all rights to the Morrison fortune and ownership of our real estate business will pass directly to Hazel. This is final. The legal documents have already been signed. Hazel's heart raced. She looked up at her grandfather in shock, unable to speak. His face was full of certainty. Grandfather, I don't know what to say, she whispered. This is not a punishment for anyone, Luke said, his gaze sweeping across the family. It's a decision to place the future of this legacy into capable hands. The right responsibility must go to the right person. He picked up his wine glass and raised it high. To Hazel, my granddaughter, and the future of the Morrison family. With trembling hands, Hazel slowly lifted her own glass, her eyes glistening with emotion. 1 week later, in the sleek, glass-walled conference room of Morrison Real Estate, Hazel sat at a large table, reviewing a stack of freshly delivered documents. Her name was printed neatly on her new business cards, Director, Morrison Real Estate. Even now, it still felt surreal. There was a knock at the door. Come in, she said softly. Her grandfather entered the room, smiling warmly as he looked around. Getting used to the office? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. Little by little, Hazel replied with a gentle smile. There's still so much I need to learn about this industry. Luke nodded thoughtfully. I have complete faith in you, Hazel. You're quick to learn and wise beyond your years. And remember, your experience in advertising already proves you know how to lead. You bring something new to the table, something this company needs. Hazel looked out the tall windows beside her. The downtown skyline stretched across the horizon, full of towering skyscrapers and endless possibility. She turned back to him. What about my father and Isla? How do they feel about all this? Luke's face grew serious for a moment, a shadow passing through his expression. They'll need time, he said finally. But in the end, the truth always speaks for itself. You've earned this, Hazel. Don't let doubt steal your confidence. Hazel nodded quietly, the weight of her new role settling in her chest. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she was ready to walk it. They had accepted her appointment. Hudson continued working in the sales officer department as he always had, and Isla had just started her new position as a financial assistant last week. Is this really okay? Hazel asked softly, unable to hide the worry in her voice. Her grandfather, Luke, looked at her with calm seriousness. They probably need time to face the truth, he said quietly. Then, after a pause, he added, starting today, I'm giving you full access to the company's accounting records and transaction histories. You need to understand how this company really operates. To know where it's going, you must first understand where it's been. From that moment on, Hazel began splitting her time between her job at an advertising agency and helping manage the Morrison Company. She was sharp, focused, and incredibly detail-oriented. And soon, her skills began to make a difference. She dove into the company's financial records from the past 3 years. Line by line, she studied the numbers, patterns, and transactions. 3 weeks later, late at night, Hazel was still in the office, surrounded by spreadsheets and printed documents. Her eyes narrowed as she checked the same set of numbers over and over again. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered. She turned to the accounting system on her monitor and began cross-referencing everything: bank statements, deposits and withdrawals, client transaction records. The deeper she looked, the more troubling the data became. Then she found it. A strange, repeated pattern. Money had been withdrawn from the company, again and again, over the last 3 years. The funds were sent to various accounts, none of which were linked to company operations. Some of these accounts were nearly impossible to trace. But after more digging, Hazel uncovered the truth. These accounts were tied to personal investments made by her own father, Hudson, and her sister, Isla. Her hands shook as she printed out the documents. "This can't be real," she whispered. But it was. She gathered all the printed evidence, shoved it into her bag, and headed home. She needed to speak to her grandfather immediately. The next morning, in Luke's private study, Hazel laid everything out. "Do you have proof?" he asked, his voice low and serious. "Yes," Hazel replied. "Everything is here." She spread the papers across his desk. For the past 3 years, Dad and Isla have taken nearly $7 million from the company. They overcharged clients, made up fake expenses, and even created false transaction records. "I've got proof of all of it." Luke stared at the documents. For a long time, he said nothing. Anger, sadness, and disappointment moved across his face. "I was blind," he finally said. "My own daughter and granddaughter. How could they do this?" "What are you going to do?" Hazel asked softly. Luke stood up and walked to the window, deep in thought. "I thought about going to court, but that would only bring shame to our family in the public eye." He turned around, eyes full of determination. "Instead, I'll call a family meeting. Not just us. Everyone." "Everyone?" Hazel asked, surprised.
Yes.
"All members of the Morrison and Hunter families, about 30 people in total. It's time everyone knows the truth." A week later, Luke's mansion was filled with relatives, cousins, uncles, aunts, many of whom hadn't seen each other in years. The atmosphere was heavy. Hazel sat beside her grandfather, her back straight, heart pounding. Across the room sat Hudson and Isla. They looked nervous, exchanging uneasy glances. After dinner, Luke stood and gently tapped his glass. "Dear family," he began, his voice steady and clear, "I've brought you all here today at an important moment in our family's history. I am nearing the end of my life, and before I go, I want to secure our future." He turned to Hazel and motioned for her to stand. "I officially announce Hazel as the next president of Morrison Real Estate." There was a soft wave of surprise and murmurs through the room, but Luke raised his hand for silence. "Before we move forward, there is something you all must know." He scanned the room slowly, his face serious. "Recent investigations have shown that company funds have been misused." The room fell into a deep silence. Hudson,
Isla.
"Stand up." Their faces turned pale as they slowly stood. "You have betrayed the trust of this family," Luke said, his voice filled with hurt but firm. "And everyone deserves to know." A thick folder lay on the table. Inside it, undeniable proof. "This file shows you took company money for your personal use and changed the records to hide it," Luke said firmly, holding up the documents. "Wait, it's not what it looks like." Hudson cried out, his voice rising in panic. "There's a misunderstanding. You'll have a chance to explain," Luke replied calmly. "But the evidence speaks for itself." Eliana turned to look at her husband, her face pale and confused. Then she glanced at her daughter. "Is this true?" she asked in a trembling voice. Isla, unable to hold back her emotions, had tears in her eyes but said nothing. Hudson stood frozen, completely silent now. Luke's voice echoed in the tense room. This is my final decision. As of today, Hudson and Isla are no longer part of Morrison Company. Hazel will take full control. A wave of shock rippled through the room. Family members exchanged surprised, confused looks. Some whispered quietly, while others just stared. Hazel stood still, not saying a word. She had been pushed aside by the family for years, treated as if she didn't belong. And now the same family was being shown the door. There was no joy in her face, no sense of victory, only calm certainty. She wasn't acting out of revenge. This was justice. Outside, the Chicago summer sun gleamed against the tall windows of the new Morrison real estate office. It had been almost a year since everything changed. Inside, Hazel stood quietly by the window, gazing out at the city she had grown to love more than ever. Her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. Everything is ready, President, her secretary, FFB said cheerfully as she entered the room. Hazel turned and smiled warmly. Thank you. Your grandfather is downstairs. He's waiting in the lobby. Most of the guests have arrived too. Hazel nodded and took a deep breath, letting her shoulders relax. Let's go. As she rode the elevator down, memories from the past year rushed back. After her father and sister's fraudulent actions came to light, Hazel had left her job at Creative Impulse to take charge of Morrison Company. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The company had lost its good name, and people were hesitant to trust it again. But Hazel was determined. With patience, honesty, and fresh ideas, she slowly rebuilt the company's image. People in the industry began to take notice. A year later, Morrison Company had grown by 27%, and it was once again seen as a strong, trustworthy player in real estate. When she reached the lobby, she saw Luke, still standing tall despite leaning on his cane. Beside him was her mother, Eliana, looking nervous but hopeful. Hazel, her mother said softly.
Mom.
Thank you for coming, Hazel replied gently. Rebuilding her relationship with her mother had taken time. After separating from Hudson, Eliana had reached out, trying to apologize and reconnect. At first, Hazel kept her distance, unsure if she could trust again. But slowly, with time and honesty, she began to let her mother back into her heart. Luke stepped forward and placed a hand on Hazel's shoulder. You've built something remarkable, he said proudly. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you, Grandpa. Hazel smiled. The celebration began. Clients, employees, and partners gathered in the beautifully decorated hall to honor Hazel's leadership and the company's success. Posters and models of new real estate projects were on display, a clear sign of the company's bright future. When it was time for speeches, Luke walked up to the stage and looked over the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he began. 1 year ago, I made a very difficult decision about this company's future. Today, I stand here with confidence, knowing that decision was the right one. He reached out his hand, and Hazel stepped onto the stage to loud applause. Later that evening, as Hazel took a moment for herself in a quiet corner of the room, her mother approached. I spoke with Isla, Eliana said softly. Hazel didn't say anything but listened carefully. She's still heartbroken over the broken engagement. Hazel nodded. Isla's fiancé had ended things as soon as the scandal came out. The shame was too much for his family to handle. What did you tell her? Hazel asked quietly. I told her the truth, Eliana answered. That our choices have consequences. There was a quiet understanding between them. Words weren't needed. What about Dad? Hazel asked. He got a job with a small real estate firm in another state, Eliana replied. We're not getting back together. Hazel looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft golds and pinks. The hurt and anger she once carried were slowly fading. In their place was something stronger, peace, clarity, and the will to keep moving forward. A new beginning, she said quietly. Yes, her mother agreed. For all of us. Hazel gave her a small, genuine smile. The future was still unknown, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid. Her path was clear. She had faced betrayal, rebuilt from ruins, and come out stronger. No secrets could shake her now. In the bustling environment of a Manhattan high-rise, Chloe was deeply focused at her desk, finalizing a design project as the setting sun bathed her copper-colored hair in golden light. Her workspace, though tidy, buzzed with creative energy typical of a product designer's home office. Just then, the sound of keys announced the return of her husband, Henry. "I'm back, Chloe," Henry called out, his voice tinged with fatigue. "Welcome home." Chloe greeted him with a warm smile, swiveling in her chair to face him. "How was your day?" As Henry loosened his tie and collapsed onto the sofa, he recounted his day's routine of meetings and paperwork. It was the usual rush. "How about you?" "I'm almost done with the logo for our new client," Chloe beamed, showing him her tablet. "Just a few tweaks left, and I'll be ready to submit it tomorrow." Henry, a successful designer manager known for his imposing, yet gentle demeanor, had met Chloe at a party 3 years earlier. They had instantly clicked, drawn together by a mutual appreciation of sincerity and creativity. Their life together was fulfilling, though discussions about future children and the intermittent coldness from Henry's mother, Madison, occasionally cast a shadow over their happiness. "Oh, by the way, Mom called," Henry mentioned offhandedly, missing the slight change in Chloe's expression. "She's planning something special for your birthday next week." "How thoughtful of her," Chloe replied, managing a polite smile despite the tension she felt. Madison had never fully accepted her, maintaining a facade of politeness while subtly undermining Chloe at every turn. "Mom really wants to improve things with you," Henry continued, hopeful. "Maybe this gift is a step towards that." Chloe merely nodded, skeptical yet trying to remain optimistic for Henry's sake. On Chloe's birthday, their apartment was filled with close friends and family, creating a comforting buffer for her. However, as the afternoon progressed, Madison arrived, commanding attention with her elegant demeanor and an overwhelming perfume. "Happy birthday, dear," Madison greeted Chloe with a calculated kiss on the cheek before announcing, "Let's all step outside for my special gift." Curiosity led the guests outside, where a brand new red Mercedes-Benz S-Class awaited, its surface gleaming under the sun. Chloe was taken aback by the extravagant gesture that felt more like a display of power than a gift. "Do you like it?" Madison inquired, her voice sweet but with an underlying command as she handed over the keys. Chloe, feeling the weight of Madison's expectations and the public's eyes on her, managed a gracious yet strained smile. "It's beautiful. Thank you," she said, aware of the complex emotions that the car represented. Despite the opulence of the gift, Chloe couldn't shake off the sense that it was yet another of Madison's attempts to assert control rather than a genuine act of kindness. Chloe felt a mix of gratitude and perplexity as she politely acknowledged the generous gesture with a smile she had perfected over the years as a professional designer. Henry's expression was one of sheer delight and astonishment. "This is truly incredible," he exclaimed, his arms wrapping Madison in a joyful embrace. Turning to Chloe, he asked, "What do you think? Isn't it marvelous?" Glancing at the luxurious car, Chloe was gripped by a subtle disquiet. What motivated such an extravagant gift? "Yes, it's quite astonishing," she replied sincerely. Deep down, Chloe doubted Madison's intentions were purely altruistic. A week later, after returning from a shopping trip in her modest car, Chloe eyed the shiny red Mercedes-Benz parked beside her in the apartment complex. The car, which she had never driven, stood out like a stark warning. Struggling with her shopping bags, she made her way to the elevator. Henry had inquired several times why she hadn't used his mother's gift. Each time, Chloe had dodged the question with excuses like, "My current car works just fine," or "I need time to adjust to it." The truth was, she suspected the gift wasn't given out of simple generosity. Back in her apartment, she listened to a message from Henry on the answering machine, mentioning he'd be late due to a client dinner. "Don't worry, love you," his voice concluded. Looking down at the red Mercedes from her window, Chloe saw an opportunity. She decided to inspect the car more closely, ensuring there were no obvious surveillance cameras around, for she wouldn't put it past Madison to take such measures. Chloe opened the car with the keys in hand. The luxury of the interior, from the leather scent to the polished dashboard and intricate controls, was undeniable. However, when she started the engine, something didn't feel right. The engine's sound was subtly uneven, and a gentle vibration could be felt in the steering wheel. With no experience in luxury vehicles, Chloe wondered if it was just her imagination. Curiously, she explored the dashboard settings and stumbled upon a preset user profile for Madison. A brand new car, and it already has her details? Chloe murmured. Delving deeper, she discovered a navigation history that included locations like Lee's home, her own apartment, and various high-end malls. More disturbingly, she found that vehicle tracking and conversation recording functions were activated, sending data to an app linked to Madison. "This can't be a coincidence," Chloe whispered, shock setting in. The features were set to monitor and record all conversations within the car. Desperate for answers, Chloe rummaged through the glove compartment for the car manual. According to the manual, the S-Class engine was known for its smooth and virtually vibration-free operation at idle. The abnormal vibration she felt was definitely not typical. Intent on understanding the full extent of the issue, Chloe pulled out her phone and began searching online forums for any mention of similar issues with Mercedes-Benz S-Class engines. Chloe discovered troubling issues with her new car, which she initially believed was a thoughtful gift from Madison. Concerned about engine problems, she checked the vehicle's information screen on the dashboard, only to find that the car was not new as claimed. It had been purchased 3 months earlier. Surprised and confused, Chloe delved deeper, using the vehicle's VIN to access a detailed history report via her smartphone. The findings were alarming. The car had been involved in a significant accident that had caused serious damage, particularly to the front end. Although repairs had been made, the engine had not been fully restored, posing a risk for potential breakdowns during long drives or at high speeds. Feeling a mix of betrayal and concern, Chloe realized this was no ordinary gift. The car, equipped with a tracking system, suggested that Madison's intentions were far from benign. This revelation left Chloe feeling vulnerable. The car was not just a flawed gift, but possibly a tool for manipulation or worse. Determined to protect herself and her husband Henry, Chloe began collecting evidence: photographs, the downloaded report, and screenshots of the car's tracking settings. Later, in the quiet of the night, Chloe lay awake, planning her next steps. She needed to convey the gravity of the situation to Henry without alienating him from his mother. The following weekend, Henry, puzzled by Chloe's reluctance to drive the car, pressed her for answers. Chloe, choosing her words carefully, hinted at her discomfort, which prompted Henry to inquire further. Confronted with no other option, Chloe decided to show Henry the issues firsthand. They went down to the parking lot, where Chloe urged Henry to start the car and experience the anomalies for himself. As Henry turned the key, the unusual sounds and vibrations confirmed that this was not the condition expected of a new, luxury Mercedes-Benz. Chloe's revelations not only exposed the car's defects but also opened a door to discussions about trust and safety, potentially altering the dynamics of their family relationships. Chloe extracted her smartphone and pulled up the saved vehicle history report as she addressed Henry. "Let's start here," she suggested. Henry took the phone from her hands, and as he gazed at the screen, his face visibly paled. "This car was involved in an accident," he said, his voice shaky, "and it was sold just 4 months ago. It's not new, it's been repaired." Chloe nodded, her voice low. "Yes, and it seems the engine repairs weren't thorough. It's risky for any long trips." Henry looked at her, disbelief clouding his features. "How could this be?" he murmured. Chloe wasn't finished. She leaned over to the dashboard, tapping into the navigation system settings. The display showed a profile named Madison, with vehicle tracking and voice recording features active. Henry's expression turned to stone. "This," he stuttered, "this is set up for surveillance. Everything in this car is being monitored and reported back to Madison," Chloe explained as Henry slumped, his hands dropping in defeat. "Why would Mom do this?" he whispered, struggling to find the words. Chloe reached out, taking his hand gently. I don't want to point fingers at Madison without certainty, but it's obvious there's intent here. She gave us a damaged car disguised as new, and she's spying on us. Anger flared across Henry's face. It's unbelievable. She lied to us. But why? I'm not sure, Chloe replied honestly. But we need to prioritize our safety and privacy. We should get a professional to examine the car. Henry nodded, turning off the engine with a heavy sigh. Let's get it checked at an independent garage. And let's keep this between us for now. As they exited the vehicle, Henry paused. How long have you known about this? Just a few days, Chloe admitted. I was torn about how to tell you. I didn't want to damage your relationship with your mother. Henry placed his hand on her shoulder, gratitude in his eyes. You did the right thing. As hard as this is, I needed to know. They entered the elevator, Henry's expression pensive. All my life, Mom has been a bit overprotective, but I never imagined it would go this far. He managed a strained smile. She's always set high standards, especially when it comes to whom I married. But choosing you was the best decision. We'll handle this together. Back at the apartment, Henry called a reputable local shop. Could you take a look at our car first thing tomorrow? It's a safety concern, he explained without going into details. After hanging up, he turned to Chloe, his smile tinged with sadness. I'm just relieved you weren't driving it. If something had happened, Chloe rested against him, her head on his shoulder. What's our next step? First, we get the car properly checked, Henry stated firmly. Then, we need to have a serious talk with Mom. As the evening sun cast a red glow through their window, they couldn't help but think of the menacing gift that sat parked below, a stark reminder of the revelations of the day. The next morning, they drove the red Mercedes to Aiden Auto Repair. It was a reputable, independent shop, and the owner, Tom Aiden, greeted them warmly. Henry introduced them, his voice laden with nervous tension. We're really worried about this car. Aiden nodded, his experienced eyes appraising the vehicle. Let's start with a diagnostic check and then examine the engine closely. As they waited in the shop, Henry and Chloe clutched their coffee cups, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. Henry stared out the window, his thoughts heavy. I can't believe Mom would go to such lengths. Henry finally broke the tense silence with concerns about their safety, particularly regarding a car that seemed suspicious. Chloe gently placed her hand on his, trying to offer reassurance despite the uncertainty that clouded their thoughts. They decided to wait for a professional opinion from Mr. Aiden on the matter. About an hour later, Mr. Aiden returned with a grim expression, carrying a comprehensive diagnostic report. Sitting down with a serious demeanor, he revealed, I have some important news. This car isn't new. It was manufactured at least 7 months ago. Henry and Chloe leaned in as Aiden continued. The engine's condition is concerning. It's been poorly repaired with non-original, critical components. If driven at high speeds or for long periods, the engine could fail disastrously, possibly even stopping the drive, which could lead to a severe accident. Chloe felt a cold shiver as her suspicions were confirmed. Aiden then disclosed another troubling discovery, a sophisticated surveillance device linked to the car's navigation system. This isn't a typical installation. It's clear that it was intentionally placed, he concluded, which visibly shocked Henry and confirmed that the device was no accident. Grateful yet disturbed, Henry requested a written statement of the diagnosis and its implications. Aiden nodded in agreement, advising them not to drive the car and to leave it at the garage for safety. As they left the office, Henry's emotions overwhelmed him, and he punched a wall in frustration and sadness. Why would my own mother do this? He lamented. Chloe, though equally puzzled, offered him a comforting embrace, supporting him through his turmoil. Resolute, Henry declared his need to confront his mother immediately. That afternoon, the couple drove to Madison's upscale apartment. They were greeted cheerfully at the entrance, but Henry requested discretion, hoping to surprise his mother. As they reached her penthouse, Madison opened the door with feigned delight, which quickly vanished when she noticed the serious expressions on their faces. Inside, Henry wasted no time. He confronted Madison with the diagnostic report. Mom, we need to talk about the car you gifted Chloe. "It's not new, but a used one. Repaired after accidents, and it's unsafe," he disclosed, his voice shaking with emotion. Madison attempted to maintain her composure, claiming ignorance and asserting the car's safety. However, Chloe interjected, revealing the surveillance devices installed in the car meant to monitor conversations and report back to Madison. This accusation caused Madison's facade to crumble, and she vehemently denied the allegations. But Henry, armed with further evidence of the car's true history and the added surveillance, confronted his mother's deceit head-on. Madison, cornered by the truth, finally admitted to her actions, but shockingly justified them by questioning Chloe's integrity, suggesting Henry deserved someone better. Enraged and hurt, Henry defended his wife, denouncing his mother's dangerous interference. Despite Madison's continued insistence on the car's safety, the truth was clear, leaving the family in a precarious and heartbroken state. Despite some initial reservations, Chloe couldn't believe what she was hearing. "The engine could give out while you're driving fast," Mr. Aiden had explained, prompting a sharp, icy response from Madison. "I simply wanted it to look like an accident," she confessed, sending a chilling silence through the room. Henry, shocked, tried to process his mother's words. "You try to kill me?" Chloe's voice barely rose above a whisper. Nonchalantly, Madison replied, "I hadn't thought that far ahead. I figured you'd be scared into quitting driving, and then the car would go to Henry." She smiled at her son. "It was all for you." Henry's face twisted with horror and revulsion. "This is the end, Mom," he declared, his voice shaking. "Our relationship is over." Madison stood abruptly, incredulous. "You would abandon your own mother for her?" But Henry was resolute. "Chloe is not just this woman. She's my wife, my partner in life. After your attempt to harm her, I can't even call you mother anymore." Madison's expression twisted. "You'll regret this," she threatened. Henry firmly said goodbye and, taking Chloe's hand, announced they would only speak through lawyers. Ignoring Madison's last attempt to justify her actions, they left without looking back. Outside, Henry sighed deeply. "It's over," he said, exhausted. Chloe rested her head on his shoulder, asking if he was okay. "Not really," he admitted, "but it'll get better." They vowed to face the future together, a tender sunset wrapping around them as they departed. A year later, life was vastly different. Chloe and Henry enjoyed breakfast in the suburban tranquility of their new home. The garden was lively with birdsong and morning light. Chloe, now visibly pregnant, happily accepted more coffee from Henry, who was delighted by their baby's energetic movements. The past year had brought profound changes. After the ordeal with his mother, Henry sought therapy to unravel the complexities of their relationship, helping him heal and set boundaries. They had left their Manhattan apartment for this peaceful house with space for their growing family. Chloe worked on her designs from home, preparing for their daughter's arrival, while Henry found a better balance between his career and personal life. Their morning was briefly interrupted by a call from Madison. Henry's expression tightened. Their interactions were still strained, limited to occasional, cautious calls. After hanging up, Henry relayed that his mother wanted to send a gift for the baby. Chloe, still wary, was reassured by Henry's promise to safeguard their new life from any manipulation. "We're a family," he affirmed, holding Chloe close. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." As the morning sun climbed higher, it heralded not just a new day, but a future filled with hope and the promise of joy with their soon-to-arrive child.